Okay, Rabbi Sai. So this is the 8th session, Hilchos Bosor B'Cholav, and we are doing two sifim, Tzadik Beis, Sif Aleph, and Sif Aleph, Sif Beis of Sim and Tzadik Beis and Bosor B'Cholav. And since altogether there's 16 weeks of Shiurim, and this is week number 8, that means that after today, we'll be half finished, which is a real milestone. On the other hand, that also means that you have to learn the same amount that we learned up till the end of today's shiur till you finish. Now, why am I mentioning that? Two ways of looking at a famous story. Gimel Thomas, short sipor, said the Rabbi climbed up a tree. Nobody else was able to climb up. And whole story, who said to what, but in any case, it came out that everybody else went halfway up the tree and they looked down and they got scared. But the Rebbe just kept looking up, so therefore he didn't get scared. He was able to get to the top of the tree. But over here, just to look and see that you learned another sif and another sif and another siman, but the importance of Chazorah becomes, I think, particularly obvious after today's shiur, in the course of today's shiur. So there's always cases, we learn certain things in Pezayim, we learn in Tzadik Aleph, we have things we learn in Tzadik Aleph, they're going to be relevant today. But we're getting now, in Tzadik Beis, you're really getting, if you pardon the expression, to the meat of Bosor B'Cholav. We're going to be dealing with the idea of Chetich Nas and Nevela today. Next week's shiur is almost completely about Chetich Nas and Nevela. And it really is fundamental all over Bosor B'Cholav and Tarubas. Today's shiur, especially the second half, I'll warn you, is Madaf Halten Cup, and it's could be difficult. But one thing for sure, if you don't go over it, it's completely lost. There's so many pratim that what I'm going to try to do is try to drill home the nakuda of where everything comes from. But there's so much variance among the poskim over here. How did the Shach and the Taz disagree about how the Shulchan Aruch understood the machlekes and pshat in the Rambam? And how did the Rambam and Rashi and Tosfos understand the Mishnah? And all this gets compounded many, many times. And the Edele in Yonim, and some of it is Svaras, and some of it is just Hachra, to be Machmer here and to be Mekel here. It's a very, very Masubach Parsha. Like I said, especially Sif Beis, part of Sif Beis, second half of Sif Beis. Now, we are again fortunate here. And when it comes to halacha l'maisa, we have the Tzemach Tzedek and Piskei Dinim. We have Piskei Dinim from Tzemach Tzedek on this. And Mitzvah Hashem, we get to it, we'll mention some of it when it comes to the end. But to really have a total picture, you have to wait until the end of halacha Dalit. And because there are things that Ramah says in halacha Dalit that Tzemach Tzedek brings up to explain what the din is in halacha Beis. So all that being said, the Nakuda is Chazara. And although you have to do Chazara all the way from the beginning, I would implore you, when it comes after today's shiur, before next week, I know it's Gimel Thomas coming up and it's busy. We'll make the recording available to go over it and bring with you the Chaveres, so those pages from the Chaveres. But I think you yourselves will realize the necessity for going over this material. You see itself, it's not something I'm really going to have to convince you of. It's a davar moving miatzmei. Okay, so this is, as I said, shiur number 8. I'm going to make this presentation. Okay, Siman Tzadik Beis, Sif Aleph and Beis. So as we mentioned from the general situation, the various simanim that we started after the definitions of Pei Zayin and the various harchakas, and Pei Ches and Pei Tes, and Tzadik Aleph, we started talking about things touching each other. We talked about Maga Kar, what happens when things touched when they were cold. Then we talked about maga cham, what happens when things are not in a pot. Very important point, which will become relevant today. You have some things hot. We have the whole din of tato gobar, and when you have to take a klippa, when you have to take natila, and so on. And then we had all the different cases of malicha that even though it's cold, but malicha reseyach, and that was all in Tzadik Aleph. And now we get to actual mixtures. That's Siman Tzadik base. So when actual Bosor b'cholav gets mixed, that's here. Later on, Tzadik Gimel, Tzadik Dalet, Tzadik Kei, we're going to have a lot about Kalim. But the truth is the principles apply. Since we say tam ke'ikir is midiraisa, we paskin that the taste of a food that was absorbed in a keli also has status midiraisa, which is why agolas kelim is mentioned in the chumash. It's a din diraisa. You have to get the taste out of the keli. So although you might not have milk dripping into your pots all the time, but it definitely happens in many Jewish homes that people have kelim. They get mixed up, and these dinim are going to apply there as well. But specifically about kalim is going to be starting the next siman, but we have a lot to learn in Tzadik Beis about the actual mixtures. And as I said, as in all of Shulchan Aruch, you have simanim which are playing back across each other. And over here, we're going to have a lot of cross-reference to Siman Kuf Hey, which has come up many, many times. But let's now jump into it. So the short, if you have to condense the whole siman into 2 words, you would probably say tipas cholav. Tipas cholav, that's the Mishnah, talking about tipas cholav, a drop of milk. But Sif Aleph is not about milk falling into meat, it's about meat falling into milk. Okay, so that's the general outline of the 2 sifim we're going to be learning today. Sif Aleph is the meat fell into hot milk. Here's a hot pot of milk on the right. And on the left, you have a pot of hot meat. You have some pot of meat which is cooking, and some milk fell into it. So that we have it. So in case you want to imagine what it looks like, meat falling into milk. So there we had fell into milk. It got absorbed over there. So the question is, what's the din of the Bosor and what's the din of the cholav? We need to know about both of them. And so too, when you have some, and also, does it matter when you took out the piece of meat? I mean, a piece of meat fell into the milk, you take it out. Does it make any difference? You took it out right away. You didn't take it out right away. So we're going to be speaking about all of these things. And here, if you had some milk that spilled into the meat, so then we have a question: what's the din of the meat, and what's the din of the other pieces of meat? Now, the milk, you're not going to be going around collecting it out of the pot over there. But if the milk fell on one particular piece of meat, what about the neighboring pieces of meat? What about the pieces of meat underneath? What about where the meat was situated? Let's say it's a whole cholent. So you have meat there, and then there's all, what's with the rest of the, let's say it's a soup. What's with the liquid? What's with the vegetables? What's with everything over there? Okay, so he's going to give over here 2 general introductory principles. So this is a picture taken from a slide, I guess, from Hilchos Taruvos. And you need this really in order to understand its background knowledge. And though la halacha, it's going to have very little practical application, but you can't understand Shulchan Aruch without it. So we have a difference between Taruvos, and like you see, it belongs to Hilchos Taruvos, but you need to learn it first, otherwise you can't understand the Shulchan Aruch. What happens when there's 2 different types of things, min b'she'einu minei, or if it's min b'minei, it's 2 of the same type of things. So on the left, you have min b'minei, so there's some kosher meat in the pot, and you have a piece of treifa meat fell in, that's min b'minei, they're both meat. Some milk fell into the meat, that's min b'she'einu minei. It's 2 different types of things. Well, let's say some chazer juice fell into some meat. So the chazer juice has a different taste than the beef. Also min b'she'einu minei. Now, when you get to Hilchos Taruvos, there can be a whole discussion. Some cases are tricky. and not so obvious whether it's min b'minei or min b'she'ena minei. So you have meat and fat. Many different cases. We'll discuss over there. Mirz Hashem, finish Bas B'chol, we'll go to Taruvas, we'll learn it over there. But in general, there are regular cases, 2 pieces of meat, min b'minei, could be from the twin cows, and one of them was a treifa, and one of them was a kshera. And min b'she'ena minei is 2 different tastes. So what is the din? So this is a famous machlekes Rabbi Yehuda and the Chachamim. That mitzad, what's the din of the Gemara, and what do we paskin lacha? So din of the Gemara, min b'she'ena minei, since they have the way at least we're learning now, 2 different tastes. We'll leave it that way till we get to Taruvas, Hilchos Taruvas. That's pashta pshat, min b'she'ena minei. You want to see whether it's nice and tam. Is there any taste in it? So how are you going to tell if there's taste in it? Milk fell into the meat. And you want to know it's Bosor b'chalav. So what, you're going to taste it and say, yes, yeah, Bosor b'chalav. So yeah, Bosor b'chalav. You can't do that. So what do? So Mitzad, the Gemara says, give it to a kfeila arma. Give it to an Aramean chef. Kfeila arma. Give it to a kfeila arma. That's what the Gemara says to do. And that's the way the Shulchan Aruch paskins. Shulchan Aruch paskins like the Ram, like the Gemara. Lahatim l'goy. That's what you do. You take a goy, and there's a whole discussion over there. The Shach brings down over here. He gives you a sneak peek into Siman Tzaddik Ches, where this is really discussed. That's this machlekes. Shulchan Aruch Ramah is over there in the beginning of Hilchos Taruvas. And the Ramah says we do not today rely on asking a goy, and you need bittul b'shishim. Okay, so that's the way it is. La halacha today, even the poskim that otherwise would go like the Mechaber over the Ramah, the Svardish poskim, they also say today we don't rely on asking a non-Jew. Even then, as I mentioned, the Shach brings down over there that is a dafka kfeila arma. Does it have to be a chef? Maybe it has to be a chef because only he has the expertise in taste. Maybe it has to be a chef because he cares about his reputation. He's going to say he doesn't taste anything, then you're going to give it to somebody else. And he's going to say, yeah, tasted batlin. How come he didn't taste it? It's going to be bad for business. Or do we say it has to be a guy, that he doesn't really know why you ask him, excuse me, can you taste this? I mean, why are you giving something a guy to taste something? Then you ask him, do you taste anything funny inside? What does it taste like? Start giving him kira drisha. Anyway, you have to find a situation. My whole discussion over the beginning of Hilchos Taruvos. But Lamaisa today, the Goyim know, the Yidden come to ask questions. They know that we're living in close enough contact with them. There's no such thing with Anyway, many reasons given, many explanations why it is for the Psak of the Ramah, and why even the Svardish poskim agree with this, that we go by everything with Shishim. But Be'ikar Adin, Medina de Gemara, it would be sufficient to taste it. So the Mephoshim bring down that there's a nafkamina. If you have today something that a Yid made a neder, let's say a Yid made a neder, he's not going to drink apple juice. Okay, not going to drink apple juice. Then there's some fruit punch. And the guy doesn't know if he can drink it. And I made a neder, he can't drink apple juice. So you're allowed to give it to somebody to taste. A regular Jew is allowed to drink apple juice. So do we say you need shishim? Or is it something you can rely on the teima? Anyway, a whole discussion over there. The Taz wants to say no. It's Vaitav Hilchos Taruvos. Now, what if it's min b'minei? If they both have the same taste, the non-kosher meat and the kosher meat has basically the same taste. So there's no eitzah to give it to a goy to taste. And this is where we have machlekes Rabbi Yehuda and Chacham. Rabbi Yehuda holds it's also b'mashu. We don't have any bittul. And the Chacham say, yeah, it's bottle b'shishim. And the din is we pass like the Chacham, you need shishim. I'm going to mention, because it's going to come relevant later on, where does Rabbi Yehuda get his din from? So one of the places brings in Gemara Menachos that by we say every day is El Makim Shel Zavachim, Par Bosor Sheyom Kippurim. Okay, so you have there was Hazoya Aben Abadim Val Pareches Val Mizbach Hazov. How do you do it on the Pareches? So we have in the Aved of Yom Kippur every year that they would pour the damapar into one keli and the darasar into the other one, and then later on you mix them together. The shaila is, it's still damapar. After you mix them together, it's damapar with damasar. Normally in Torah we say there's bittul berev. I mean, the Raisa things are bittul berev normally. So which is bigger, the damapar, damasar? Par is a big ox, big cow, and the soyer it's a little goat. So obviously there's more dama par than dama soyer. Nevertheless, it's still called taruvas dama par with dama soyer, even though it's much less dama soyer, and it's certainly batul berev, even much more than that. Excuse me, I forgot to turn off my ringer. And nevertheless, it's called dama par with dama soyer. So we see from that Rabbi Yehuda that if it's min b'mina, it's there's no bittul whatsoever. It's also, and I'll mention it here, halachically, when you have something like this, they talk of mix together the different blood, but halachically speaking, once you have a liquid, normally we consider that the liquid has been mispashet one into the other. So we have exceptions to the rule. Other dinim, you have a barrel of wine that falls into the ocean, and it makes a shinemaris you can't use for a tefillah, even if the ocean might be good for tefillah, for mikveh, but if it has a shinamara, so then you can't table there. So if you have this big purple blotch in the ocean there, so although eventually it'll get mixed up, and right now it didn't, but halachically speaking, in normal cases, we say everything got mixed up. But the Rabbi Yehuda paskins that it's asur b'mashahu, and in the Gemara, we'll soon see the Gemara Rav paskins also that it's asur b'mashahu. We need that to understand the background for this halacha aleph. But the halacha is you need shishim. What's that b'shishim? So the gzeira shishim are going to get mixed up between memina and b'sheina, but you can't taste it anyway. So what we're going to be dealing with in halacha aleph, we're going to be dealing with a case that you cannot tell the difference of the taste because it's min b'mina. Okay, we'll soon see. I'll tell you briefly what the case is. What happens when the halacha aleph is that the meat fell into the milk. So when the meat falls into the milk, a couple of things happen. Taste from the meat goes into the milk, and then the milk gets absorbed into the meat. Now, if it becomes a two-way street, that the milk goes into the meat and then comes back into the milk, so then if that happens, we have a problem in min b'mina. Why is that? When we have the taste of the meat going into the milk, it's min b'sheina. It's two different tastes. You can taste it or have shishim, whatever. If you have the taste of the milk going into the meat, it's again bin b'sheina, two different things. So again, then the Gemara give it to a guy, otherwise it's shishim. But if you have the milk that goes into the meat and it got cooked there, and then it became bosor b'cholav, so even though it has tam bosor in it, but it's still mainly cholav, when that cholav goes out into the rest of the pot, we have cholav b'cholav. We have the cholav in the pot, which is regular cholav, and then we got cholav that became bosor b'cholav. It's min b'mina, and you're not going to be able to taste it. That's what's going to be relevant in the mechaber. Okay, if you didn't catch that, that's good. We're going to learn it. It's fine. We're going to have it soon. Okay, so min b'mina minatayda is nice and tam, like we said, tam keker. If somebody gives taste to something, that's a din minatayda. But min b'mina, since it doesn't give taste, minatayda, it's batul berev. That's the way we paskin. Whether Rabbi Yehuda agree with that or not is another question, but certainly according to the Chachamim, minatayda is batul berev, but we need midrabanan, we need shishim. That's Hakdama Aleph. Any questions? Okay.
So how does Rabbi Yehuda derive that it's mashahu when it's minatayra batul berev?
No, that's what I mentioned. When we say minatayra batul berev, Pashas only according to the Chachamim.
Okay.
And there's a whole discussion whether Rabbi Yehuda did midrash midrabanan, but Pashas he learns cases from cases we have in Chumash. So Dama Parva, Dama Soyer is didn't Chumash. Yeah, so Pashtas he holds midrash, but we paskin like the Chachamim, we don't paskin like Rabbi Yehuda. Okay, but it's important to know, to understand. Another Hagdam. Okay, so Chatichanas and Nevela, like you see in the upper left corner, is mainly in the next two sif. Sif Gimel Dalet, all about Chatichanas and Nevela. But you have to learn the basics of Chatichanas and Nevela now, otherwise you can't learn Sif Malach basic. Okay, so let's say you have half a zayas of cholav, half a zayas of cheese, and a half a zayas of meat, and you make a cheeseburger, a mini little tiny cheeseburger, size of a kazayas. Okay, do we say it's only chatzi shir on a minatayra, also minatayra? let me give a better case. You have a half a zayis of chaylev, and then you have a half a zayis of shuman. Chaylev is not kosher fat, and shuman is kosher fat. And you mix it together. The person mixes it together, cooks it together, whatever, and eats it. Person gets malchus. Your malchus for eating a kazayas of iser. This is a half a zayas of heter and half a zayas of iser. What's it din? Malchus?
No.
No malchus. Chotzi shir also minatera. So good. He did a iser minatera, but don't get malchus. Let's say it was a chotzi zayas cheese and a chotzi zayas bosor, and it cooked together, it gets malchus. Yeah, it gets malchus because it makes a new iser called bosor b'chol. We have a kazayas of bosor b'chol. It's not pshat like it's iser blue. If you remember in Pei Zayin, we had a whole discussion over there that can we say, old shach over there, that can we say that bosor b'chol, even though we treat it like a piece of chazer, it's like a whole zayis of chazer. It's a new iser. It's a iser machmas atzmei. It's a new matzias of iser. But since one absorbed the other, well, maybe it's not mamish the same like a piece of chazer. All discussion, the shach over there about what happened when the keva absorbed the taste. That's the end of Sim Pei Zayin. But in general, we consider that the paradigm case of chtichanas and avela is bosor b'chol. The shaila is whether you have chtichanas and avela by shari surim. So let's say the case I gave you before, when you had the half azayas of chaylev and the half azayas of shuman. So if you say chtichanas avela by shari surim, not only by bosor b'chol, so then if by shari surim, it's also going to be nas and avela. You're going to have a kazayas of iser if you say that. But that's the machlekes we're going to be learning next week. Yeah, but when it comes to bosor b'chol, for sure it's chtichanas and avela. So I just want to, I like seeing you guys, since most of you are not showing your partsufim anyway. So this way, at least I can see the PowerPoint and I can read the words. Okay, so let's say you have some milk. There you have a drop of milk hiding behind hakdama base, and it's going to fall onto the meat. So you may shishim babasar nagad chalav. If you don't have bittul b'shishim, chaticha kula nas and avela. It becomes chaticha nas and avela, and the whole thing. It's not just a drop of iser. It's if this thing is 4 ounces, this piece of meat, so it's 4 ounces of iser. Because chtichanas and avela. It's not just you can't eat it because it absorbed iser. Like if that was not a drop of milk and it was just a drop of chazer soup and it fell inside, you wouldn't be able to eat it either. Okay, but that doesn't mean that it would be nas and avela. Depends how you paskin. Do we say chtichanas and avela is only bosor b'chol, but the shari surim also? Good, we'll learn. Patience. But by bosor b'chol for sure, it's kula nas and avela. Now let's say the meat fell into the milk. Okay, imein shishim b'chol negara bosor b'chol kula nas and avela. So too over here. Here it's a cold piece of meat, but imagine that piece of meat was cooked and it fell into the milk, and the milk was hot. Even if the meat was cold, yeah, the tato gover. I guess we have to assume that that's a boiling pot of milk, and it falls into the milk, and then the taste of the bosor, there's no shishim, goes into the meat, into the milk. The taste of the meat goes into the milk. It's going to be nas and avela. Clear? Questions? Oh, so we have a little action over there. Milk fell in and made a treif that turned black over here. Here the meat fell in and made it turn brown. Everything became nas and avela, bad colors. Okay, so now we're going to see what these introductions actually do for us. So, kazayis bosor shenafal lateich yera shel chalav. This is going to be sif aleph. Sif aleph is the meat fell into the milk, and sif beis is the milk fell into the meat. So the Gemara says, if you have a kazayas meat, it doesn't have to be a kazayas. It says kazayas, but it's not the dafka over here. So meat fell into a pot of milk. Omar Rav, Bosor Aser, B'cholav Mutter. That the meat is going to be Aser because you don't have shishim against this little piece of meat that fell into a whole pot of milk. So the Bosor is going to be usher because it absorbed the taste of the milk. But the Cholev, we're assuming you have shishim, and therefore the taste of the meat that went into the milk is less than shishim, and it's going to be okay. The problem is that the Rav holds like Rabbi Yehuda. That Rashi points out for us that the Rav holds like Rabbi Yehuda that min b'minei is also b'mashahu. So what does it have to do with anything? This is milk and meat. Why is it min b'minei? We'll skip we'd have to learn some more background to learn the rest of these didim over there. But what we're worried about is what I mentioned to you before, that there's I think we have a picture over here. Let's just go straight to the picture. Okay, there's two stages. Here, the piece of meat fell into a pot of milk. So the first thing that happens that the meat and the milk have an exchange program. So the taste of the milk goes into the meat, and the taste of the meat goes into the milk. That's the exchange program. So since we assume this doesn't look like there's bittul b'shishim, but if there would be bittul b'shishim, so then the meat would be usher because there's obviously much more milk than there is meat. But if there was shishim in the milk against the meat, so then we would say that the milk would be mutter. But that's good with min b'shein and mine. But the problem is that's only shlav rishon, is that the bosor is giving to the cholov. So here the blue is tam bosor and the red is tam. The blue is tam cholov. So it's going from the milk into the meat, and then the red is tam bosor. It's going from the meat into the milk. Good. That's only the first stage. But what happens afterwards is the second stage. Like I said before, the tam cholov shenivla b'bosor v'nesa. We have the milk went into the meat, got cooked there. And now, not only the meat is usher, that it's basar b'cholav, the milk that was absorbed in the meat is also basar b'cholav. And if that leaks out back into the pot, which is the second shlav, so then what's going to be? Tam ha'cholav shenibla b'basar v'nesar, the cholav that went into the basar and became prohibited, basar b'cholav, and then it goes out, chayzer misarevim shara cholav, is going to go out and get mixed with the rest of the milk. And what do we call that? Min b'mino, min b'shein mine.
That's min b'mine.
That's min b'mine, because you got milk in the pot, and you got milk which absorbed tam basar, which came into the minute. So you have min b'mine. What should Rav say? What should be with the cholav? Rav said basar asur cholav mutter. Okay, that would be good for shlav rishon, for the first stage. But if you have to worry about the cholav coming back in, what should Rav say? What should be with the cholav?
Also b'mashu.
Should be also b'mashu, like Rabbi Yehuda, exactly. So the Gemara says, it's not highlighted. Le'elam kasava Rav cholav name aser. In a regular case, Rav would say the cholav's also not good. But they're talking about a special case. And this is going to be important. This special case is going to get directly imported straight into the Shulchan Aruch. And this, what are we talking about over here? That it was a rapidly boiling pot of milk. And what's the metzias of a rapidly boiling pot of milk? The mivla bola mifla lapolit. That it, while it's busy absorbing, it'll absorb, but it won't give out. It works the other way too. I thought of lemif lebola. Okay, you'll learn all about that in Malicha. In any case, what's happening is, as long as it's in an active boil, so then the milk, the shlav rishon is happening. So the milk is going into the meat, but that the milk is going to come back from the meat back into the main pot of milk, that's not going to happen as long as it's still rapidly boiling. So the Gemara says, but the thing's not going to boil forever. Safe. Kinayach other polit. But at the end of the day, kinayach, once it calms down, once it rests, hadar polit, then it's going to return and spit out the taste. And then you're going to have a problem of min b'mine, milk and milk. So the Gemara answers, that you got there first and you took it out of the pot before it had a chance to stop boiling. So it's still rapidly boiling. So the shlav rishon attack a problem. You took out the piece of meat, it goes in the garbage. Also ba'ana, because Bosor Aser. But the Chalav, even we're not worried about as long as the Shishim, because we pass like the Chachamim, but even Rav, who paskins like Rav Yehuda, that it's min b'mina should be also b'mashahu, he also has no problem because it did not give out anything into the pot. Okay, so that is the Gemara, and we're going to see that directly in the Shulchan Aruch. We're going to come straight into the Shulchan Aruch. And by the way, the dinim we're learning today, Shulchan Aruch, are almost straight word for word from the Rambam. I say almost because I didn't check it out, but I think it's straight word for word from the Rambam. And that's one of the reasons why, just it goes without saying, and everybody probably knows this already, but I'm going to say it anyway, is that when you learn Shulchan Aruch, you wonder, like, why is it so illogical the way this is written? It picks these weird cases. And like, who would ever think of doing such a thing? Does this ever happen, B'chlal? And you have a case, and there's a whole discussion about the case, this and that. Why is it written like that? So the Pashto answer is that the structure, everything is built on the Gemara. So your question, not on the Shulchan Aruch, question on the Gemara. You know, the Gemara is not writing out the dinim like Shmir Shabbos Kilchasim. You know, like, you know, Rabbi Farkash's Hilchah Shabbos, where everything say the Masuda to get all the things out of the way in a logical order and every single case you could think of. Okay, the Gemara is teaching you key cases from which you'll be able to derive everything else. So therefore, it's going to talk about this case. So call them Vasilka. Why? Because it came in the Gemara. That's why the Rambam speaks also about such cases. Okay, so this is the case of if you don't get it out soon enough. So this, you see this arrow is blue and red because it's awesome inside the Bosor B'chol. It's going to go back into the milk and it's going to be min b'minei. And the Shlav Hasheni is only going to begin rak lach shepasik resechas asir. Only after it stops boiling does the second stage happen, and that's when Rav and Rabbi Yehuda and everybody else are going to have a problem. Turns out the Shulchan Aruch also has a problem, even though the Shulchan Aruch passes like the Chachamim. And that is, we have no way to figure out whether the taste is there or not, according to the Machaber. You're going to have to go to Shishim. But that we'll soon see. Okay, so basically what happens, Shlav Rishon, really there's one of the Hakdama that we actually mentioned it already, but I just want to make it a little bit more clear because it's going to be very relevant. I'm going to say a mashal, which has to do with learning, not to do with Bosor B'chol, but I think it's a very important mashal. I once heard the person who was training teachers said that when you're walking upstairs, say you have a child first learning to walk upstairs. So he goes on to step number 1. If he gets solid step number 1, so then he gets his equilibrium and he goes on to step number 2. Good. Gets solid on step number 2, goes up to step number 3. Good. He can keep walking up the steps. But if he goes on step number 1, he's a little bit shaky and he says, you know, let me go on to step number 2. Goes to step number 2. What happens? Gets a little bit more shaky. Then he says, you know, I have to keep up. I'm going to go to step number 3, a little more shaky. And so he keeps on going. If he gets up to step number 5, where he falls down the stairs. Okay, so it's very important, even though you said something, and I apologize for those that this is too repetitious, but I think it's important to get it clear, get it solid, what it is, why we're discussing all of this. And the reason is, in Hilchos Ta'aruvos, the Machaber paskins like the Gemara that says, if you have an iser, you give it to a goy to taste. Okay, and the Rama says we don't give it to goyim to taste. We have Mashai B'Shishim. So now over here, can you give it to a goy to taste or not? What's the Shulchan Aruch going to say? So if you're only worried about the first stage because you got the meat out before it stopped boiling, b'shlav ze meil timas agoy. V'im b'chol v'entam bosor achol mutter. Give it to the goy to taste, according to the Machaber, and he tastes it. He says, "What does this taste like?" He says, "Milk." He says, "You taste anything else in there? You taste any meat in there?" I don't know how that's Masech Lefitume. Whatever. Let's say you don't need Masech Lefitume in such a case. And he says, "No, I don't taste any meat." So according to the Machaber, it's mutter. According to the Machaber, Shishim is only an emergency clause. Even if you don't have Shishim, it would still be mutter, because the real din, Shishim is just an imitation Neis and Tam. The din is Neis and Tam. Acid taste. So you want to know it's Neis and Tam or not? Give it to somebody to taste. They'll tell you it's Neis and Tam. That's the din. Eyes learned that you don't have Shishim. So who cares? I don't have Shishim. That's what the Machaber is going to say. The Rama says we don't trust this team of Lagoy. And even over here, the Ramah would want Shishim. But according to the Machaber, if you only have to worry about Shlav Rishon, it's fine. But the problem is, if you didn't get it out soon enough, so then the Machaber is stuck. B'Shlav Zele Meil Timas Hagoy. Because it's min b'mine. It's arach shishim b'cholav neged Bosor. And then you're going to eat shishim against what? Because you don't know how much milk came out. This blue-red arrow coming out over there is not as big as the whole piece of Bosor. So do we need shishim against what? Shishim against the whole piece of meat? Shishim against the whole piece of meat? We need shishim against the whole piece of meat because we don't know how much milk came out. The poskim want to say that you can keep recycling the milk and keep acerating it again and again and again. Okay, but no, but we paskin over here, you need shishim against the piece of meat. Well, that's Rabbi Yehuda v'Rav l'yel shishim kimin b'mina isa b'mashu. According to Rabbi Yehuda and Rav, you didn't get it out soon enough, then the whole pot goes in the garbage. Because minim b'mina is also b'mashu, and it's not bottled. So we don't paskin like Rabbi Yehuda. We paskin like the Chachamim. So therefore, as long as there's shishim, it's okay. Questions?
Yes. Why only according to Rabbi Yehuda's Isser Mashahu, where it keeps going and going? I mean, how it could always, even if it's shishim, right, by the Chachamim min b'minay.
Yeah. Okay. I threw in something which I can't really go into now. It'll be discussed later on. But that din of how to estimate how much of something came out, we're going to be talking about later. So it's a very, very good question. Maybe I shouldn't have mentioned it now, not to confuse things. But over here, the din is we mentioned one time against a piece of bosor, and we assume that's the amount of halal that can become prohibited.
And also, how do you see the two shlavim in the Gemara, mivla bola, miflat lepali?
Yeah. So what are we talking about? It's only talking about the first stage. The mivla bola, it only absorbs mifla lepolit. So it will absorb, but it won't spit anything out.
The meat of, so then how is the pot of milk? What then the pot of milk shouldn't be usher even if it's
excellent bonus points. Ding 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 ding. Okay. So this is asked by all the Mefarshim, and it's also up to whole tumult because the Beis Yosef seems to be a little uncertain about this question. And then at the end he answers it. And the Bach says, like, what was this question? It's obvious. And well, it's a whole discussion. Turns out it's machlekes rishonim. But I'll tell you what the conclusion is. Conclusion is as follows. I'll try to make it.
Can you go over the question, please?
Yeah. Okay. I'll go back here. Let's go back to the Shlav Rishon. Shlav Rishon, we said that what happens by the Shlav Rishon, that the milk gets absorbed by the meat, right? And then the tamid of meat goes into the milk, yeah? That's what we said. So if there's no shishim, we say that the cholav is going to become masar. So the question is, if we're talking about a case that was yerer asachas, and the Gemara says mibla balav mifla lepalit, if it doesn't spit anything out, so who says it's only milk it doesn't spit out? Maybe it doesn't spit out taste of meat either. So therefore, the Rishonim learned pshat is like this. You understand the question? If while it's boiling you can't spit out, so how is the meat spitting out? How is the meat spitting out tam basar? We say the meat's not spitting out chalav, but maybe basar it's also not spitting out. Yeah?
Who says it? Who says it is spitting out?
It says the cholav is mutar only it's bottle b'shishim. Yeah, that there's no argument. That there's no machlekes about. Anyway, if you look carefully, the easiest way I have of explaining this is as follows. First of all, the bottom line is, yes, it's true. The milk will not get spit back out, but the time the meat will yes spit out. Why? Look at the words of the Gemara. This is one of the things, this Poshet Hafla fella. You see it by Teresh Shabbat all the time, but the more you learn Teresh Shabbat Pech, I mean, you see it in the Rabbi, you see all the time, it takes about the Shemus of the Gemara. But here, I say Poshet Halach, I think. Mivla Bala. What's it talking about, Mivla Bala? Gemara says Mivla Bala. What's it talking about? What's absorbing? What's absorbing what? The meat fell into the milk. What got absorbed?
The meat is absorbing the milk.
Yeah, the milk went into the meat. That milk that went into the meat, the Mivla Bala, Mivla Pala. That doesn't get spit out.
But
by the way, I didn't see this anywhere. I'm sure it says somewhere.
no, but grammatically it doesn't make sense.
The din it says. So anyway, if it's ois gehalten or not, I don't know. I didn't see it anywhere, but it's a good way to remember it at least. The only thing that we have this klal is the same thing, the mivla above, that thing, mifla apollo. In other words, the same thing can't go in two directions. One direction it can go, two directions it can't. Okay, let's go further because we have a lot to do. Excellent question. We have to move on, unfortunately. Okay, we got meat falling into milk over here. Things are coming, lebedek, and now we're going to have the case. So what's going to happen if you take it out before it finished boiling? So what's going to be the din? A Bosor aser, that we said, yeah. There's no bittul b'shishim. What's with the milk?
Shishim kosher.
Yeah, if it's shishim, it's kosher. So the Shulchan Aruch says, how are you going to tell? Ramah says you need shishim, but the Shulchan Aruch, who always wants to give it to a guy to taste, it says over here, you can give it to a guy to taste. Give him the milk and see if it has tam basar. Because you got it out before it stopped boiling. You're only worried about the shlav rishon. You're only worried about the tam basar in the chalav. You're not worried about the chalav in the chalav. However, if you took it out after it already finished boiling, so then the basar is still the same thing. Okay, but what's with the chalav? No, what's going to be with the chalav now? What's the Shulchan Aruch going to say?
Shishim.
Shishim, exactly. Everybody says you need shishim. Kisaravim chalav b'sari. The chalav mixed with treifa, the kosher milk mixed with the treifa milk. It's min b'minei, and even if we don't pass like Rabbi Yehuda, but practically speaking, how are you going to tell if it's nice and tam? You can't tell because it has the same taste. So that leads us to Sif Aleph. Now let's learn Sif Aleph inside. So this is Sif Aleph Shulchan Aruch. So you can read it from the screen. You can read it from your chaveres. You can read it from a real life Shulchan Aruch. However you want to read it is good. Well, we have basically the whole Sif. If you have a piece of meat, Farshim say it doesn't have to be excised, even less than excised, and it fell into a boiling pot of milk. So the Mechaber says, you have a guy taste the pot. Yeah. If he says that there's a taste of meat in it, then it's prohibited. And if there's not the taste of meat in it, then it's mutter. I feel it. It's not only in this case, this is Bechal. According to the Gemara, it learns in Mechaber that the main thing is nice and tam, and shishim is only an emergency clause that you can't figure out what's going to do, what's the story with nice and tam. So that piece itself is also the piece of meat, but the rest of the pot, if the guy tastes it and he doesn't have any sense of tam basar, then it's okay. But then he adds right away, but how's it going to help? We have this problem of the milk coming and mixing with the milk, and it's not going to help him to taste. So therefore he puts in, when does this apply? That you got there soon enough to take out the piece before it was able to spit out the milk that is absorbed. And when is that? What does it mean soon enough? That before the pot stopped boiling. But if you didn't get there soon enough to take it out, and now was able to spit out the milk that had previously absorbed, and that's now also Bosor b'chalav, and it's min b'minei. Even if the guy tastes it and it doesn't have any time, it's awesome. Elim ken yesh b'shishim, you still need shishim. The team is not going to help over here because we're not worried only about the tam basar. We're worried about the tam cholav, the treif cholav, and that the guy is not going to be able to taste the difference in treif cholav and the kosher cholav. You can't taste that difference. So therefore, the Mechaber says we're going to need shishim. So if you got there by shlavarishim, then the guy tasting it is sufficient. But if you got there too late, then you're going to need shishim. Hagon, the Rama says, "V'yin lakam and simon sadeches." That's the first simon. You're right over there. Then the minig Ashkenaz, we never rely on a guy tasting things. We always need shishim. Good.
What's the temperature of the sikha? Is that the same as Yad Tzivah display? What?
It's a good question, but pashtus, it means actively boiling, actively bubbling. One of the we have this same concept brought a couple of places, and we have different chumras that are brought. And one of the it's a Prima Godim. It's not on the Sif, I think it's elsewhere. And he writes, "We're not bucky today on the Shiur Sikha. Hagufa, we're not bucky on." You have a very similar thing. You have by Chalita, you have by Chametz b'Pesach. So, according to halacha, you could take Pesadika wheat, boil up water, and throw it into the water. Who says you have to bake it to stop it from chimutz? You could boil it and stop it from chimutz. It's in water. It's mamish flour and water. Yeah. Yeah, the matzah is also flour and water, but you're baking it for 18 minutes. So if it got fully cooked and it happened all at once because it was rapidly boiling, that's chalita b'reischa. It's also mutter. I think it was the Rebbe's in Stern Nasara. It's either the Rebbe's in Rivka, the Rebbe's in Stern Nasara. One of them used to do chalita lepesach. She knew how to do it, but b'chlal, many of the Ga'inim said we're not even bucky in this already. But anyway, there were people that were bucky in it. But when it comes to this Shiur Sikha, Prima Godim says we're not bucky in it anymore. Okay.
So why again don't we say that it always, if you want to say that like the tom doesn't make a difference because of min b'minay when it's what's it called, the tenuach mir sichasa. So like why do you cut it off to say it only does it to shishim, but like it doesn't keep recycling through?
Yeah, that's another discussion. We're going to learn it inside. It's a topic we have to learn. We have to learn separate. It's a good question.
We just had it also in the last year as well.
Yeah, it pops up all over, but you have to learn things in the proper place. Otherwise, we're never gonna. We'll learn what it's talking about over here, and then we'll go back to it. Okay, let us go. So that's Ramah b'chol tzorach shishim. And this is in the whole Shulchan Aruch like that. Again, it's a neder. That's the case I gave you. It's a neder. You can give it to a yid to taste. So then you can say that we're bucky b'teima. The Taz holds b'chal, we're not bucky in teima. Oh, it's right over there, yeah. That we're not bucky in this Shiur Sikha. So therefore, we're always going to need shishim, but according to the minhag of the Ramah and the minhag of the Sfardish Poskim, it doesn't really make any difference. We're not bucky in that because anyway, we're always going to be using teima. The problem runs in according to the Taz who holds b'chal, we're not so bucky in teima either. We're going to learn that in Simach Tzadik Vav. But over Charif, what's happened to our taste buds?
How can we give it to a yid to taste when it's maybe a dava asa?
No, he's talking about a neder. In a place where it's mutter to give a yid to taste, for example, it's a neder. That's why I brought you an example. A person made a neder not to drink apple juice. So that guy can't taste it, but somebody else can yet taste it. Okay, let me get weiter. Because Siv base is, I was about to say a mouthful, but it's a headful. Okay, so that was the meat falling into the milk. Okay, we had a couple of curveballs, but basically straightforward. But Tipas Cholov is a different story. And just for your information, this is really, really simplified. They did a nice job over here of simplifying it because it's if you just go to the nice academy, learn it yourself, and try to dig your way out, it's not as clear as you have over here. Okay, so here we have some pieces of meat in a pot, and some milk is going to fall into the pot. That's sieve base. We have three different possible scenarios of what exactly it fell into. Let's say all the pieces of meat are submerged, like chicken soup. Chicken soup, you don't have any pieces of meat normally sticking out the top. I imagine the chicken could float to the top maybe, but you're talking about here in case number one on the right, that they're all covered by liquid. Okay. Then you have another case where you got chtichas that are completely not in the liquid. So here you have, let's take each of these as a pyramid. You got three pieces. So the bottom piece is totally covered by liquid. The second piece is half in the liquid and half out of the liquid. And then the top piece is completely out of the liquid. Okay. So that's another case. We're talking about a case. So in case number one, that it fell into the meat, but it didn't really fall directly into the meat. It just fell into the soup, the gravy, fell into the liquid. Whereas this middle case, it fell directly onto the piece of meat, so it's in a pot. It's in a pot, but on the other hand, it's not in the pot of soup or the pot of gravy. So it fell in the piece of meat by itself. And the third case is that it fell in the middle piece. When you have a piece that's half in and half out, what's going to be the story? Okay, and the Shulchan Aruch, we have a big machlekes rishonim about this, and much to our dismay, if you would just read the Shulchan Aruch is basically quoting the Rambam, and how does the Rambam learn? He tells you the din, but he doesn't tell you which case he's talking about, which creates a very difficult situation for the Mefarshei Rambam, and a very difficult situation for the Mefarshei Shulchan Aruch, and therefore a very difficult situation to figure out what exactly to do. Now, he has a picture later on in the slideshow, but just to make this a little more relevant, where although these things do happen, but very, very rarely, but although we're going to be learning about kalim later on, but if a person takes a milchika fork, a ben yemei, let's say a person used a fork to make a, I don't know, cheese omelet. So he used a fork and cheese omelet, he made it in a klirishin, it was hot. And then within 24 hours, he took that fork and he stuck it in one of these three pieces of meat. Okay, halachically speaking, that fork, and certainly, again, we're going to the same question of how much ad masai, how much of the fork, but certainly the part of the fork that was covered with hot cheese, okay, is like a piece of cheese halachically because tam keik. Okay, so now this is something which definitely happens. So we're going to differentiate between these three cases. What happens if it was the bottom piece that was completely submerged? What happens to if it was the top piece, which was completely not submerged? And what happens to it was the middle case where it's partially submerged? Good? This is just describing what it is we're going to learn. This takes us to the end of the shiur, basically. Okay, but we're going to have to unwind this, and we're going to have to learn this basically from the source. Okay? So, the first two cases we'll try to learn before the break, and then the last case we'll learn after the break. So let's take the simpler case first. Here we got chtichas Bosor shkues b'techaret. And now some milk fell in. Now, what happens to that milk? Does it get evenly distributed, or it's more on the pieces of meat than somewhere else?
It's
What do you
evenly
say?
distributed.
Evenly
Just like,
distributed. No reason it should be. It's a liquid to liquid. What's the problem? Yeah, dama par dama star, right? So here it's very poshut. The din is poshut. You take everything. You count the volume of the soup and the meat and the vegetables, everything that's over here. You see how much milk fell in, and if there's shishim, everything's okay. Anyway, either it's usher or it's mutter. Life is simple. Okay, so you're not happy that it fell inside, but at least life is simple. You're not stuck with a big suffix what to do about this. Okay, no shishim, pieces turn black, trefa meat. Now, what's with the top piece? Now, I'm just going to review something from Siman Tzadik Aleph, which we mentioned, and even then we didn't delve into it totally because it's more the subject of Siman Kufay and Taruvas, as we keep saying. But if you have a piece of roasted meat, here we got a piece of hot meat in a pot and some milk fell on top of it. What would be if this piece of meat was sitting on the counter? It was a hot piece of meat. You just made a barbecue and you took the barbecued meat and you put it on a plate and it's sitting over there on the table, on the picnic table, and then somebody spilled some milk on it. What's it do? So in general, we said tatogavar, okay, but if something which is sli, we had a whole discussion that the milk tatogavar, then the milk is for sure going to be also, right? So some cheese fell on it, whatever the case is. The shaila is if you had the cold piece that fell onto the meat, does the meat become usher? Then we had all discussion. Do you take kedei klippa? Do you take kedei natila? So over shaman, maybe it goes through the whole thing. Okay, I'm not going to go into the pratim of that din. But this that we learned over there in Tzadik Aleph about a magacham, the things touched when they were hot, it was not in a pot. We're not talking about regular ways of cooking. And here in Tzadik Base, we're in the kitchen with pots now. We're cooking the regular way. And when you cook things inside a pot, more things are happening. So you see the steam coming out over there. The artist made some steam marks coming out. So the fact that it's in a pot, even though this top piece of meat is not sitting in the gravy, it's still different from that if it was a hot piece of meat just sitting on a counter or in a plate, not in a pot. Because there's moisture inside this pot. Even if the pot is not covered, it's in a pot, right a couple inches below or a couple of millimeters, however far it is from the liquid over there, there's hot boiling liquid going on over there. And there's hot pieces all around. And there's steam which is within the walls of the kedera. So therefore, the din of bishul is different. And we say darach bishul, asra teira, right at the beginning of Peizayin. So this is one of the reasons darach bishul, Bosor b'cholav is, the cholav is a liquid. So that's the nice Kalim point out over here that you can't compare this, that even though it's out of the liquid, you can't say it's like sitting on a counter. It's not sitting on a counter, it's still inside the pot. Okay, so now what happens, along is going to come the milk over here, a little drama, and the milk falls on top of the piece. Okay, so now what are you going to do? So what are you going to do? What do you think? We're going to need shishim. Shishim of what against what? Let's say 1 ounce of milk fell on the piece of meat. What can we use to be mavatal that 1 ounce of milk that fell on the piece of meat? Can we use only this one piece of meat here? Maybe we can use his neighbor downstairs or the neighbor in the basement. Maybe we could use the whole pot. In the last din, we were able to use the whole pot. Yeah, but there it fell into the marach. Here it fell onto the piece. It's not even sitting in the liquid. So what do you think? You need 60 ounces where? An ounce of challah fell on the piece. Where do you need 60 ounces? Where? In the piece. Im b'chaticha aleh nishpacha chalav yesh shishim. Can I get a chalav hakol mutar? So as long as you had shishim in this piece, so there's no problem. Okay. Again, life is simple. Okay, because you have bittul b'shishim in the piece. It's no worse, certainly, than if it would be sitting on the counter and it was less than shishim. So less than shishim fell in, a drop of milk fell onto your piece of meat, less than shishim, end of story. What if there's no bittul b'shishim on that piece? Do we have to worry about the neighbors? First of all, can we use the neighbors to help be mavatal? Or can we not use the neighbors to help be mavatal? And furthermore, what happens to the neighboring pieces? So im ein shishim b'chaticha neged hachalav hachaticha asura. The piece are going to be asur. There's no shishim. However, there's a kula over here. You can't use the rest of the pot to be mavatal, but it's on a world of its own. So therefore, we say that it doesn't spread to the rest of the pot, and therefore shara tavshel mutter. How does that sit with you? What's the story with what's the story with this piece of meat? Why does it not sit well with you?
Nice and available.
Nasa nevela, and it's hot and it's sitting on top of its neighbor. What would happen, by the way, if somebody bumped into the pot and it fell into the pot? What would be with the rest of the tafshul? You need shishim against what?
The whole chaticha.
The whole chaticha. Okay, so that didn't happen. It's going to happen later. Don't worry. But it didn't happen in this slide. It didn't happen. Okay, over here, the rest of the tafshul is mutter. But what's with the neighbor? So the shach says, Taki, you have to take kedei netila. Anything which is touching this chaticha, you have to take kedei netila. Netila is the width of a finger. You have to take 2 centimeters. And over there, we use that din, which was similar to over there that we learned in Sadak Aleph, that you learn in Simon Kufay. Why you don't need more than that? Because it didn't really get mixed up into it. But since there was a Nagia Cham, you have to take Kedei Netila.
Why is it? Where do you differentiate the netila and Kedei Klipa?
We consider it like a piece of tzli. When you have tzli, you take Kedei Netila. If it's not tzli, then it was hot from some other source. Then you take Kedei Klipa.
Why is it considered?
There are many protim in this din. This is a whole erichas in Simon Kufay.
Why do we apply the same logic?
The shach just sends you over there to Kufay, just reminding you that there's such a simon. And remember to look over there and don't think that everybody else is kosher v'yasher and just walk away.
Why wouldn't we say the same thing that Rav says in the Gemara about the mivla bala miflat leipolit? So that it's boileya the milk, but it's not maflit the milk into the piece below it, or it's maflit any isser for that matter.
Because the problem is now the piece was nasa nevela. The whole piece is now wasser. We're not worried about being maflit milk. We're worried about it being maflit itself. Hot piece of meat. It's nasa nevela. They even turned it black. So it's like a piece of chazer now.
So it becomes the same din as
you have a hot piece of chazer. You have a hot piece of chazer sitting on your cholent.
So an isser that touches something which is
exactly. It's a machmasatz. Okay. So the question is, question which arises is similar to what you asked. Okay, so this I mentioned before, comparing the case of this piece when it's in the pot to the case of the piece of tzli when it's not in a pot. So we learn that if there's no mashka around it and it's have something which is sitting on the barbecue spit and some cholav dripped onto it, so then we take kedei netila. That's the din of tzli. And why is that? Because there's no liquid around it. So we only have to take kedei netila. Take 2 centimeters, the eve etzba, width of a finger is 2 centimeters. So you take kedei netila. That's good enough. Over here also there's no reitiv around it. It's dry around it. So there's a reitiv a little bit further down. So why is it that we can't get away with kedei netila and we're answering the chaticha? So I mentioned one of the answers. The shach asked the question. He brings 3 answers. The shach, and some of the answers he's quoting from other Makedus also. But the shach first answer, he brings that when you have a davar shamein, all the rules change. So he considers a chalav nechshav kedavar shamein, and since the chalav is considered, when we learned over there about making cheese, we learned that there's such a thing as milk fat. There's milk fat inside the milk. I don't know, today our 2%, 1% milk over there is barely milk, much less a davar shamein. Whatever case, it's the shmei advertising, low fat. Yeah. Any case, normally milk, he wants to say, is considered davar shomin, and something with davar shomin is going to go all the way through. Now, the truth is, we had a taz before that quoted other Makedis that says, "Oh, machlekes rishenim, whether chalav is yet considered davar shomin and not considered davar shomin." The Shach brings down over here. Also, the Nesikel talk about it. So this reason itself doesn't really stand on its own because not everybody agrees the chalav is considered to be a davar shomin. So you have the second teretz, which I had mentioned to you before, and it's a little bit more than what I mentioned to you. That since it's in a pot, it's not the same as something. In a chanam, it's not mamish sitting in the liquid, but it's not sitting in a desert island either. Im hevel, it's inside a pot, and there's steam coming out of this food. I didn't mention that factor also. They got steam going on inside the pot, and what dripped over here was also a liquid. In order to make something spread, it's not just the time. Here we got a liquid, and there's all sorts of liquids turning into steam over there. So it's a hot environment. So the mamish next to this chaticha happens to be dry, but the whole area is full of steam. It's inside a pot. So in such a case, kadei natil is not going to be enough. That's a shach's second teretz. Then he brings the third teretz. Third teretz is a little more of a deichik. He says we have to talk about a specific case. We're only talking about the dim will only apply if it's a Bosor that the milk will go through the whole thing because it's the Bosor shaman. According to this teretz, if you had a piece of meat that was not shaman, excuse me, if you had a piece of meat that was not shaman, you had a dry chicken breast or something like this, so then you would only need kadei natila. But the we require more than a tila. We need shishim against the whole piece, and we have these three reasons given by the Shach.
Well, question on the Tirutz Beis and Gimel. Mimon of Shach, like the chaticha is also it's also being toilet juice from it if it's in a hot environment. So that's also a davar shomin.
I mean, if you have a dry piece of chicken breast, piece of schnitzel, just as giving out liquid, that doesn't make it shamin. The liquid coming out of that is not fat; it's just juice.
What if you have a
dam, the classic example when it speaks about these dinim, it compares it with dam. So when dam gets absorbed into something, so dam, it's clear, it has no shamnunis at all. So dam is not a davar shamin, even though it's liquid. So just because it's liquid doesn't mean it's shamin. Shamin fat has a different, fats and oils have a different.
It's not oil that when the meat is juicing up in a pot or whatever, and
not necessarily not a dry piece of schnitzel.
So this is davka dry meat. This is not. This is only right or.
The nafkamina would be if it's a piece of dry meat. Okay, so the most meat I could say it'd be called davar shamin. Saying the meat from South America is dry meat. The mumchem say.
So okay, we're talking. So all this is just talking about dry meat in a.
Not necessarily. It's according to which one of the three terutzim. The ma'isa is on all of it. We're not going to allow you to get away just with kadei natila. What's the reason? So we got three reasons. So if one of them doesn't apply, use the other two reasons. Okay, and now we have a Rambam. Now this is one of these Rambams where when you read it, the beginning of the Rambam seems to contradict the end of the Rambam in the same halacha. And how to make sense out of it, you have many mefarshim trying to figure out what to do. So what did the Machaber do? They say a lot of times the Rambam is from Klali Rambam that you have Lashon Hashas, something in the Gemara, and it's not so mefurish exactly what it means. So Rambam just quotes Lashon Hashas, clap cup and band, good, end the story. He doesn't have to be frumer than the Shas, right? So he'll explain it if he can, but if it's not clear what it means or the machlekes what it means, a lot of times it'll just be maitik Lashon Gemara. So Rabbi Yosef also learned the same derech. So he has a Rambam, he doesn't know what to do with the Pasha quotes Lashon Rambam. So it's just kicking the problem down the road. Somewhere at the end, there's a Rav that's going to have to pass in the Shaila, and he doesn't know what to do. He doesn't know Pshat in the Rambam. And now he doesn't know Pshat in Shulchan Aruch because the Shulchan Aruch passing like the Rambam. Okay, what are we talking about? We're talking about Nir V'Kisa. The Nir V'Kisa is in a Gemara. Now, what's Nir V'Kisa? That, let's say, some milk fell in, and the piece that it fell on, there was no shish. And you want to save that piece, for whatever reason. Okay, whether you can do this lechatchila or not, let's say it's only b'diavad, but it happened. Whatever happened, somebody mixed up the pot. Somebody didn't know, and they mixed up the whole thing before the milk was fully absorbed into that piece. That's called nir or kisa. You put on the cover. Once you put on the cover, so then all the vapor inside the pot, since it's being kept in by the cover, it evenly distributes that milk throughout everything. So that's what it says here. If immediately after the milk fell in, kis es hasir, you covered the pot, or you mix together the pieces into the whole thing, so then you don't need shishim in that one piece against the milk. The entire kedera will be counted to count as shishim. So that's the case of here the milk fell in, right away at the Rangachapt and he put a cover on it. Okay, so that mixes everything together. And so too, the milk fell in. Somebody had fun with this PowerPoint, I don't know. And mixed it together over there. I was pretty active over there. So it also mixed everything together. So then you can use the entire pot to count as shishim against the milk. And if there's shishim in the entire pot with all the chatichas and everything together against the milk, so then the whole thing's going to be mutter. So the beginning of halacha, what's the problem with the Rambam? So far, there's no problem with the Rambam. It says kisa, oy irvev, kisa yainir. The problem is that the end of the halacha, the Rambam says kisa v'nir. He says both. And it looks like if you just read Pashat the Rambam, it looks like at the beginning of halacha, he says either one of these two is sufficient. And at the end of the halacha, it looks like you need both. Okay, we'll discuss it soon when we learn inside. Okay, so there are those that say Lashon Gemara and the Lashon Shulchan Aruch. So we're going to learn the Shulchan Aruch now. We're going to learn the Sif Aleph inside, and then we're going to take a break. But keep an alert eye, whether it's Lashon B'diavad or Lashon L'chatchila. Anytime the Shulchan Aruch says something, and the Gemara too for that matter, it can give you a case that if somebody did something, the din is such and such. That's the Lashon Shel B'diavad. You can do such and such. That's the Lashon L'chatchila. So if the Lashon is, if you covered it, then the din is kach v'kach, then it's only in you for B'diavad. Why should it be only B'diavad? Because we have another Isser called Mimabatal Isser L'chatchila. That's an Isser D'Rabbanan. You're not allowed to intentionally Mimabatal Isser. So even the first case that we gave, that the milk fell into the soup, you're allowed the chatchila to pour a couple of drops of milk into the chicken soup. You're not allowed to do that. It's bottled. You're not called mavatal isel chatchila. Not allowed to be mavatal isel chatchila. So yesha kosher shalachila ein lasses kisa v'nir. Kain mavatal isel. You're not. You're running into another problem over there. You learn also the beginning of Hilchos Taruvos. The din of ein mavatal isel chatchila. So that's an important thing to mention. You'll see from the Lashon Shulchan Aruch that it's that it looks like a Lashon Shel B'diavad also. But anyway, there's a whole discussion whether the fact that it fell in makes it already B'diavad. Okay, but that's the whole discussion of the Pasuk. So one of the Achreinim that's frequently quoted is the Chamuda Daniel, and he learns interesting din over here. See, he derives Mikan Shablias Isser Einamiyadis. Since it says, I mean, you're not going to think of doing this until after it fell, right? So it takes some time from the time the milk fell in until you put the cover on or until you mixed it. There was a couple of moments in between. And it still helps. So the Chamuda Daniel derives from that. We see from here that the absorption of the Issa does not happen immediately. You have a whole discussion by Agolos Kalim. When you kasher Kalim, you put it in the boiling water, how long do you have to leave it in the boiling water? A whole discussion in the Rishonim, you have to leave it there enough time that the water penetrates to the pneumius of the Keli and then has time to draw out the taste into the outside of the Keli. I mean, who has Psarah HaKedesh know how long that takes? It's something you need to learn from somebody who knows how to do it. But is there shiv? Yesh chalkim. The Chamuda Daniel said it doesn't happen right away, and others say no, it does happen right away. So let's learn inside Sif base. We're not going to learn the whole Sif base. We'll learn parts of Sif base. And this yellow part is the part that I was pointing out, the problematic part in the Rambam. I'm sorry, I said that it was both near v'kisa. That was a mistake. What I meant to say was that the near v'kisa is metchila batsof. You only have to do it at the beginning, or do you have to do it the whole time till you finish? Okay. So at the beginning, it looks like you only have to do it. Beginning of halacha, you only have to do it at the beginning, right away when it fell in. And once it's mixed, and it was already batul b'shishim. But later on, he says near v'kisa metchila batsof. Yeah. You know what? Let's first read the mechaber. Nafal chalav l'tech kedei Shabbos. If milk fell into a pot of meat, this is Lashon HaRambam, and he doesn't talk about what kind of chaticha we're referring to. So let's just learn for now. We're talking about the chaticha that we just finished talking about that's sticking out of the liquid altogether. Teima chaticha shenafal le'achalav. Taste that piece. You know, because the mechaber holds you give it to a kfei l'arma. So the one that's doing the te'ima is the guy is tasting it, and we're going to need shishim. So if there's no taste, which means with batul b'shishim in our lashon, so then everything's okay. And if there was the taste, there was no batul b'shishim, so that piece itself becomes asur. And the Rama reminds us, liddidan. And according to us, they ain't saying we don't rely on the kfei l'arma, but in a shishim b'chaticha. Then you need shishim, with no shishim farfal. Yeah. So that piece becomes awesome. I'm going to skip this next piece because we don't have enough. I have to give you more of an introduction for that. We'll learn that after the break. Go over here. What he says is that one piece becomes aser, and if it falls into the pot, it's going to aser the whole rest of the pot. But that's only if you didn't shake up the pot at the beginning when the challah first fell in. You only did it at the end. Chacham, you mixed up the whole pot at the end. Now it had time to aser the chaticha. The milk had time to aser the chaticha, and then you come at the end. Shkayach, come at the end. And you shake it. If you would have shaken at the beginning, then we could be mitzvah the whole kedera to be mavatal l'challah. But you didn't. You waited until it became mustard, and then you shook it. So now the whole this piece of nevela fell in. The whole piece became mustard. So if you didn't shake it at the beginning and you didn't cover it, so then it's going to answer the whole. It's going to answer the whole pot. Avalim nir b'tchila v'atzof, says the Rambam. But if you shook it from the beginning to the end, or you kept it covered until the end, how come it's started levatel tamacholov? Everything is mitzdaref. So the question is, what's this metchila batsof? We're dealing now with a very limited question. After the break, we'll talk about the whole thing, about how it ended up answering the whole rest of it, and what are we measuring against, what does it mean atzof. Right now, at the beginning, he says, "Oh, you only do it batchila." This is the Steer Rambam. And if you did betchila, if you shook it up at the beginning, so everything should have been okay. But then he says that if you didn't do it then, you only did it at the end, it's no good. If you did it from beginning to end, then it helps. What's going on over here? So the Shach says, so the Beis Yosef and Marib and Chaviv give two different pirush. Basically, the Beis Yosef says he doesn't. Nobody really has a good explanation for this. The documentation writes over there. They were deichek to try to, justify what the Rambam wrote, but nobody has an explanation for what the Rambam wrote. Shame. So the Beis Yosef says we need to tchila batzof. Basically, it's a pirish tzorach l'nar al kasas asir coals maners. Tchila batsof as long as it's boiling. Why do you have to do it? Why is there not enough to do at the beginning? We're afraid he's not going to mix it well enough. Like a min gzeira. That's why he writes Matchila Batsof. Mari Ben Chavis says, no, it's Indian for Lashon. Lashon ain't sof lav dafke. He doesn't mean you have to do mamish to the end. And he has a whole explanation how it fits in with the Lashon Rambam, that it's in the Lashon, whole ganze langa drasha. And the Shulchan Aruch, he brings in this Matchila Batsof, and the Shach learns that that's because he holds Yimamish Nid B'Tchila Batsof. That's the way he learns Pshat and Rambam. But La Halacha, we hold not like that. And the Ramah is going to say not like that. First of all, there are those that say B'chal, even the Rambam didn't mean like that. And certainly the Ramah says there's no need for that. Yeah, La Halacha, Yesh Lipslik Shadai B'Nir B'Tchila. It's enough that you did Nir or Kisa, that you did it right at the beginning, and that would be sufficient. And Taz has another answer. Taz says, Yesh Makal Lafash, Nir B'Tchila Batsof, Pirush at Seif is Pashtus Tipus Acholef. B'Tchila Batsof until the milk finishes its traveling. Lamais is a Zman Kotzer. It doesn't have to be too long. Anytime you're going to stir it up, so you stir it up until the milk is all spread out. So that's what it means B'Tchila Batsof. So it's not really such a big stira because you're talking about a very short time period. Okay, we went way over. This is like a bit of a marathon. We'll take a 10-minute break. And Mitzvah Shem, we come right now. It is 8:25 Eastern time. 8:35 we start promptly. Mitzvah Shem. And I sort of doubt really that I'm going to finish, but I want to make sure you understand it because there's some Havana going on over here. And I think if you got it, I think maybe well, yeah, finish because we'll be able to go through quickly. But first we try to get Havanas Ha'inyan. I'm going to mute the mics over here. Yeah. Okay. Now time to dive in to the next piece. You can right away tell which PowerPoints were made by the Havanani people. Oops. And which ones I made. I don't have a professional team over here. I just have something that I thought would be helpful that you understand. And I just made some circles and lines and arrows to help explain it. We got to get to the right place here first. I'm sure there's a faster way to do it. That's where we got up to here. So this, please, nobody laugh. Okay, this brown piece over there is a piece of meat. I know it doesn't look like a piece of meat. I could have done better than that. But anyway, that's a piece of meat. It's brown. It's a piece of meat. And here is some reitev, there's some soup, and it's sticking half out and half in. And if you want, I can make some more balls that they're sitting on top of each other. There's another one sitting on top of that. So if you remember, we had three cases. We had the one that was totally submerged, the one that was sitting on top of something that's half submerged, and we talked about both of those cases. If it's totally submerged, so then the whole thing is shishim against the whole thing. If it was on the piece that's stopping it, shishim against the chaticha, unless it was nira or kisei, according to Beis Yosef, nira v'kisei. Otherwise, you need shishim against the just the piece to be mavatal. Now, what's the story with this piece? So let's think about this piece and what's going on with it, because I think you'll find this helpful. And then once you have the Havana behind it, the names that are attached to each of the opinions become a little bit more easy to understand. So we have a drop of milk fell right on top of this chaticha over here. So now what happens? What do we want to know? So does it go through this whole chaticha? Does it go only up to the, this chaticha, the bottom half of it is wet because it's sitting in the soup, and the top half of it it's going to get dried out, right? It's outside of the water. We could have made the pot higher. It was not, but the Badafka made it like that. This is just how it came out. Fine. But you have half of it out of the liquid and half of it in the liquid. So now the milk falls over here. Now, is it just going to go to half of the chaticha and say, no, you're right, I'm not going further? Or is this chaticha one unit? In other words, if it goes into the top half of the chaticha, Is it going to go into the bottom half of the chaticha? But pashtus, it's one piece. It's going to go from the top to the bottom. Fine. Now, what about the part that's inside? So you remember when we had the chatichas that were submerged, we said, it's submerged, so it's all part of the pot. So wait a second. So now when the tape went into the chalav, so now what happened? The chalav went into the bottom half of the chaticha, and at the bottom of the chaticha, it's like chad gadya. So the top half, the milk went into the top half of the chaticha. From the top half, it went into the bottom half. Now from the bottom half, is it going to go into the soup?
Dinatila.
So it's a machlekes Rishay. The ri, it's a machlekes basically Rashi Tesis. Ri, you can say tenetila because I made a bad drawing. Okay, if you make this drawing that the walls of this pot just go up higher, so then there's no kedei netila anymore. We didn't even let you get away with netila for that piece that was totally outside the reitiv. I drew it; it's sticking out of the pot, but it's a bad drawing. Ignore that. If you assume that the pot went all the way up to the top, it's certainly further away from the case of tzli than the last case we learned when it's totally outside of the reitiv. Here, half is in the reitiv. So the Ri holds like this. That whole din that you need shishim in the chaticha to be mavatal the tipus chalav. That's only talking about a piece that's totally out of the reitiv. The last case we talked about. But if half of it's, even if half of it's in the reitiv, even if part of it's in the reitiv, holds the Ri, it goes straight through. Okay, so the milk is going to come into the top half. From the top half, it's going to go into the bottom half. And from the bottom half, it's going to go into the soup. Okay, that's what the Ri holds. Read from the Balei Tesos. Now, what's the logic behind that? The logic is it goes from here to here because it's all one piece. And it goes from here to here because this is all in the reitiv. That's the logic of the Ri. Whether that's the logic of the Ri or not, that's a way that we can understand it. Now, the Ri's opinion has a chumrah and a kula. So the kula of the Ri is obvious. You don't need shishim in the piece against the cholav. It's good enough to have shishim in the whole pot against the cholav because the cholav is going into the chaticha, but it's also going straight down to the bottom of the chaticha. It's going into the pot. So according to the Ri, you got a big kula. When it says that you need 60 times bigger the chaticha than the tipus cholav, that's only if it's all outside the reitiv. The last case we spoke about. But if someone's in the reitiv, says the Ri, no problem. It's good enough that you have shishim in the whole pot. It's good enough. That's going to be mabatal l'tipus chalav. That's a cool. Agav, it comes with a chumrah too. What's the chumrah? Because if the piece was totally outside and you didn't have shishim, what's with the rest of the pot? So the rest of the pot, we say, okay, take out kedei netila, whatever it was touching, but the rest of the pot is kosher. You have cholom for Shabbos. No problem, you have cholom for Shabbos. But over here, if there's no shishim in the kedera, that's the chumrah. If ain't shishim in the kedera, is a sort of whole pot's us. In other words, the fact that according to the Ri, the milk goes all the way through is a mixed blessing. It's a blessing because we can. The whole thing goes into the kedera, so you can use the kedera to be mavat. But now that it went into the whole kedera, going together with that, zchus comes together the chayv that it could answer the whole kedera too. Azay halter Ri. Now, Rashi doesn't hold like that. Rashi basically says that the case that we say you need shishim in the chaticha against the tipus chalav applies to this case too. Rashi doesn't really differentiate between the previous case and this case. If it's totally outside the reitiv, you need shishim in the chaticha against the tipus chalav. If it's even partly inside, you still need shishim in the chaticha. You're not going to be able to be mitzdaref the rest of the kedera, and that's the chumrah of Rashi that you tzorach shishim b'chaticha, that you need shishim in the chaticha to be mavatul l'tipus chalav. Now, what happens if you don't have shishim? What's with the rest of the kedera? So that we end up. Why did Rashi get the schus of having 2 arrows and the Ri only has 1 arrow? It's not because he's older. It's because there's a machlekes rishainim in das Rashi gufa. It's machlekes the Rashba and the Ran. How to learn the Rashi? So the way the Rashba learns Rashi, he learns Rashi is very consistent. Rashi is consistent. That yes, it'll go from the top half of the chaticha to the bottom half of the chaticha? Because there's one chaticha. It's going to go from the top to the bottom. Reitev, who says it's going to go to the reitev? It's not going to go to the reitev. So therefore, I can't use the reitev. I can't use the soup to be mabatul tipus chalev, but it's not going to ask the rest of the pot either. So that's the kula. According to Rashi, main shishim kedera muteris. The rest of the pot's okay.
How does
That's
it
the
not
way
go into the roitiv if in the place of when you have a the solid Bosor on the bottom of it, it goes into that.
It went from the Bosor to Bosor, so it all stays contained within one chaticha. You want to know why it doesn't go out into the rest of the kedera? That's what the Re says. The Rashi says it doesn't.
No, but I'm saying according to Rashi, according to the other case of with the solid, but the Bosor al gabe Bosor. We need Natila, right? If it was not shishim in the Bosor.
So that's two different pieces. This is all one piece. Within one piece, it goes from one to another. Two different pieces is much different than one piece, just part of it in the liquid part of it.
Well, no, hold on. Rashi said if there's no, everyone agrees that the piece is usher. Now, so Rashi's saying it doesn't go from the chaticha into the roitiv, but how does he say that it goes into from the chaticha to another chaticha if it was on top of it? Like it should be more.
You want to answer the reitev kadei natila, something like that. Okay, good. We got worse than that. We got bigger problems than that. I see your point is well taken, but we got a bigger problem. And that's because the Ran does not agree with the Rashba. The Ran, this is what the Rashba holds, but the Ran holds, no, it goes into the rest of it too. But it's a one-way street. We cannot use the rest of the Kedera to be Mavatal, but we can use the rest of the Kedera to Aser it. So if there's no Shishim in the Chaticha, the way that Ran learns Pshat in the Rashi is that once you Aser the Chaticha, so now you got the bottom half of the Chaticha sitting in the Reitiv. Where did you hear such a thing? You took a piece of chazer and put it half in some soup. It's not going to aser the soup. Of course, it's going to aser the soup. So why is this any different? So the Ran wants to aser the soup too. He's not going to take the schus of the soup to be mabatel the tipa, because the tipa is on the top half. And the Taz says that this is what the Machaber means to paskin like. That the Machaber paskins like Rashi according to the understanding of the Ran. That's what the Taz says. And the Shach says that the Machaber paskins like the Ri. How do you like that? I hope everybody's stunned. Okay, because this is complicated, but there's svaras here, not going into dakistic svaras, just figuring out what's going where according to who. So really over here, until you go to, if you don't go to the Beis Yosef, you're totally lost over here. You have no idea what's flying. The Shach and the Taz are going to be throwing around the Ran and the Rashba and the Ri and the Rashi and this and that. Who, what, where? In the Reitiv, half in the Reitiv. The Machaber doesn't even say anything. Bring Lashon Rambam. And who does the Rambam paskin like Rashi or the Ri? What the Rambam paskins like.
If Mafafeya to make it also, what's this for? Not to use it connected samach, connected
what to be mitzvah of the Reitiv?
Yeah. How do you work both worlds simultaneously?
So you're saying like the Ri? Okay, very good.
Yeah.
Because Rashi doesn't agree. Rashi says it ends by because we understand that the top half of this chaticha and the bottom half of this chaticha, it's got a split personality. This chaticha. It needs a psychiatrist. This chaticha, because it's half in the reitiv and it's half out of the reitiv. So its absorption and its ability to be balei and pilot is different from the top half to the bottom half. So everybody's agreeing here. I say everybody, because I didn't give you a third opinion. The Mordechai differentiates between the top half and the bottom half. Treats it like two different pieces. Okay, but he's not so much quoted about a pasuk. Okay, now we're ready to learn. This was all just to give. This is my way of introduction. This I thought was the missing slide. So pardon its primitive nature.
Are we gonna try to? Are we gonna like start to try to like understand? I don't understand the the Rashba, I don't get. I really, it doesn't make any sense to me.
Okay. We're not gonna, the Teira Hivel Ilmarat Tzarich is a lot of mafarshim, but now you know where to find it at least. Right now, we're dealing primarily with the what. It's difficult to understand the what and who's saying what and what's the psak din. Because this is all we're talking about basically in the Machaber now. Okay, we're going to have a machlekes, what does the Ramah hold also? And we pass like the Ramah. So fortunately, we have a Tzemach Tzedek on this, so everything comes out at the end according to Piskei Dinim. And not sure we'll get there today. I'm sort of getting this feeling that we won't, but I'd rather understand what we're capable of understanding. There are many, many different, you could read hundreds of pages on the thing, and I have not found anything that I would be able to present. So,
just to clarify, in the Kravitz, when it mentions this, these different days, it mentions the tour. That the tour is quoting the Rashba.
the tour, we're going to come to the tour. We'll see. The tour says many, many spectacular things in the Sif. The tour is shooting down half of the Rambam. The tour is all over. A lot of things the tour is doing.
Okay, so it's not exclusively the Rashba because it quotes it here as if it's the Rashba.
Oh, that's one of the things. Yeah. Okay, let's try to get to. Okay, and what makes this very difficult if you're just learning this inside is that this was already untangled from the inside out with the chatichas in the Reitev and out of the Reitev and halfway in between. You have to really go through all the nice kalim until you get to that at the end. Okay, so let's start getting to work over here. So here we have a piece that was half inside the Reitev, half outside the Reitev. Rashi holds Tzarech Shishim b'chaticha keneged ha'chalav. Why? Ki nechsheves kachaticha michutz l'Reitev. He holds there's no difference between if we call the one that's on the top number one, the one that's in the middle number two, and the one that's totally subverted number three. He holds that number one and number two have the same din. Okay? He holds that when the Gemara says it's din, that it's talking about both case number one and case number two. And that's the way the Rashi, and that's the way the Rashi learns. That's the way the Rashi learns. Rashi, there's no difference between the one that's added at chaticha and the chaticha. You don't understand it? Right now we're trying to understand what they said, not so much why they said it. Let's first, it's difficult enough. So if you give a little space over here, we'll take a break once we lay out the shittas to make sure we understand what everybody's saying. Okay? The Ri holds Tzarech Shishim b'chol hatav shel keneged ha'chalav. Why? Ki nechsheves kachaticha b'teicha Reitev. He holds number two is like case number three, and Rashi holds case number two is like case number one. So therefore, in this case, when the tipus chala fell on it, so Rashi is going to be machmed say you need shishim in the chaticha, and the Ri is going to be mekel because just like in the case number three, you can be mashayir against the entire tafshil. Okay. Im ein shishim b'chol hatav keneged ha'chalav. What's the din of the tafshil? So let's say you don't have shishim, so that's when everything flips. So according to the Ri, if you don't have shishim in the tafshil, so you will clap your patchim with the hand because you were able to use the whole tafshil because you had a big kula over here to be mavatl tipus chalav. But then it's worse because if you would be done it like case number one, like Rashi did, and it was certainly according to the Rashba at least, then you'd be able to save the whole pot. But according to the Ri, it's farfalin. Call it tafshil also. So if you have shishim in the whole tafshil against the tipus chalav, then everything's mutter. But if not, then das hari, the cool is you can be that you treat it as if it went into the whole tafshil. That itself is the chumrah. Since according to the Ri, we look at this tipa like it fell into the tafshil, we're going to have later on when you have a tipus chalav that fell on the outside of a pot keneged a tafshil. And Allah treats it like it fell into the tafshil. If you have a covered pot and a tipus challah falls on the cover, it's as if it fell into the tafshil. The Ri holds that here it fell into the chticha that was half in, half out. It's like it fell into the tafshil. So therefore, you can use the rest of the pot to be mavatl b'shishim. But then if you don't have shishim, then you're out of luck. because now the whole pot is treif. According to Rashi, what's with the rest of the pot? You need shishim against the chaticha. And if not, so then we're treating it, we just said, Rashi treats it like it's chutz l'reitiv. Now, does he really treat it like chutz l'reitiv? So according to Rashi, Yamamis treats it like chutz l'reitiv, and the rest of the pot's okay. Achaticha bolbad, for call shara tafshil mutter. Okay, im ira v'chaticha surah b'tafshil. Shlamazlo came and he mixed it into the rest later on. Sorach shishim connected. Now you're going to need, it's not an avail of this piece. There was no shishim against the tipus chalav. So now you're going to need shishim against the chaticha. But the Ran holds chaticha surah v'isere shara tafshil. Shishim connected chol chaticha. He's got that chumrah too. He holds Rashi doesn't have that kula. Rashi only has the chumrah. So you cannot, it's a one-way street. You cannot use the tafshil, timim avatal tipus chalev. You're going to have shishim only in the piece of meat. Timim avatal tipus chalev. Okay. But on the other hand, we don't say that this tipus chalev stops at the bottom of the chaticha. It goes to the tafshil, asur the tafshil too. That's das haran. So therefore, just keep watching accidents happen again and again over here. So the tipus chalev fell in. Now, what does the Shulchan Aruch hold? What does the Shulchan Aruch hold now? We have Machlekes now, the Rashi and the Ri. And within the Rashi, we have another Machlekes. What does Rashi hold about the rest of the Kedera? So now what does Shulchan Aruch hold? Shulchan Aruch, you can't tell what Shulchan Aruch holds from me to Shulchan Aruch. He's just quoting Das Ramba. Thank you very much. We have a whole Machlekes. Who does the Ramba paskin like? Does he paskin like Rashi? He paskin like the Ri? Problem. So we got a machlekes shach and taz. The shach holds the machaber paskin like the Ri, and the taz holds the complete opposite. That he paskins like Rashi according to the Ran. No shach lists all the paskim over there. He says Rav paskin like the Ri, and he lists a whole bunch of paskim. So then the Taz brings down this one, that one, another one, a couple over there. So along comes the Shachra on the Kodesh HaKesef that he wrote on the Taz. And he said, what's going on over there? He said, I didn't list enough poskim for you. Siman, Mershainim, Achreinim, everybody else that paskins like that. Anyway, that's a Machlekes Shach and Taz. What the Shulchan Aruch holds? The Shulchan Aruch paskin like Rashi, on which Taz and Rashi, or the paskin like the Ri. So therefore, what's the Allah according to the Machaber? We have a Ramah, by the way, left to learn. Because the Ramah doesn't agree with any of this, just by the way. I mean, he's going to be an outgrowth of the existing Rishonim we learned. He's not, making up a new Gemara here. But the way he's balancing things is going to be somewhat unique. So to find al halacha, this is what the Machaber holds. So according to the Shach, pas like the Ri, Meshishim b'chol atavshel keneged acholav atavshel b'chatich mutar. As long as you got shishim in the whole pot against the tipus chalev, everything's okay. Enim ein shishim b'chol atavshel keneged acholav atavshel b'chatich asur. That's what the Ri holds. It's as if the drop of milk fell into the pot, just went straight through this chaticha into the pot, and be mashayah b'shishim. You got shishim, have a good day. You don't have shishim, the whole thing goes in the garbage. Shame. What about according to the Taz? Im yesh shishim b'chol atavshel keneged hachaticha. Rashi. We're assuming now that we don't have shishim in the chaticha. If you have shishim in the chaticha against the cholav, then it's okay. There's a little tiny drop of milk fell into less than shishim in a chaticha. The chaticha is okay. But if you didn't have a chaticha that's 60 times as large, so now what happens to the rest of the tafshel? So im yesh shishim b'chol tafshel neged hachaticha. Notice the purple. But according to the Ri and with Shach Paskins, you just need to be mabatal against the cholav. And now according to the Taz, you need to be mabatal the chaticha. So you need shishim against the chaticha. Tafshel v'chaticha mutarim. You got shishim, everything's okay. Yim shishim b'chol tafshel keneged hachaticha tafshel v'chaticha. And if you don't, then everything is asur. Questions? Everybody got knocked out?
No, the gab of the chatich, it's always a cooler. The shayla is the gab of the rest of the meat. I mean, the rest of the tafshil.
Right.
Is that correct to say?
You're asking over here, Yeshishim b'chol hatavshel keneged hachaticha,
I'm
hatavshel
saying it's a
hachaticha
statement.
mutorim.
But
No,
what?
that chaticha doesn't become mutter. It's probably talking about the rest of the chatichas.
No, I understand, but I'm saying in general, the gav of the chaticha, it's never going to be a bigger chumrah over here. This is always going to be either we're going to use the help of the rest of the pot to be matter the chaticha, or just keep it as the chaticha is also if no shishim in the chaticha.
According to the Taz, but according to the Shach, then we can be matter the chaticha too.
Right, and I'm saying the gav of the chaticha is only going to be a kula, or it's going to be status quo.
Talking about who? According to the Taz or the Shach?
Anybody. The sugya here is the gav of the rest of the pot.
Well,
What-
it's the chaticha also. It's the chaticha also, because according to the Shach, you can use the whole.
To be
the whole
makel, to be
kedeva
makel in the
battle then you're going to be batter the chaticha.
Thing to be makel the chaticha, but not to be machman on the chaticha.
No, the Taz is machman the chaticha. Rashi is machman the chaticha.
But when we say he's machmer the chaticha, he's not machmer the chaticha more if the chaticha would have been out than in.
He also the same thing.
Right, the same thing.
Yeah.
Is this a machlekes also in the gather of chaticha nasas nevela or not?
No. You know something? Let me reserve judgment on that question. After we finish Sif Dalet, ask the question again. Because your question is sort of really solved at the end of Sif Dalet. Okay, so you got to wait a week. Okay, so the Shach is Machriya, and that's a lahalacha. That's the way they hold Shach and Tas. Let's go further. Okay, now we have another disaster. The milk for I don't know why you keep making the same mistake again and again. Shame. The deepest challah fell over there, top of the milk. Should take this milk and just put it away somewhere safe. Okay, now what does the Ramah hold? The Ramah is, as they say, very interesting. The Ramah. The Ramah is a unique sheet over here. Im yesh shishim b'chol hatavshel keneged hacholov, hatavshel mutter. Okay. If you have shishim against the cholov, not against the chaticha, the tavshel is mutter. Who does that sound like? The Ri or Rashi? The Ri? The Ri is the one that said you can use the whole kedera to be mabatel the tipus cholov. Good. And according to the Ri, what's with the chaticha itself?
Mutter.
The chaticha mutter. The Ramah says no. You can use the rest of the kedera in order to be mabatel the cholov. Aval chaticha atzma sura. Yas is the chaticha. So the question is, what in the world? Where did this come from? The Ramah get this from. Found it's a new Rishon. What exactly is going on over here? So, how we explain the Ramah is, guess what? What's the explanation of this Ramah? It's not really such a machlekes, but okay. Let's take the Shach first. According to the Shach, Mechaber paskin like the Ri. Ramah is often machmer on the Mechaber. Yeah. So Ramah was mistapik in the halacha like Rashi or the Ri. Okay, so like the Ri, he's going to hold partially like the Ri and partially like Rashi. It's an interesting thing, and how to work this through. Let's just finish the sentence a little bit. See, Paskins partially like the Ri, that you can use the whole tafshel to be mabatel challah. But he's not going to be so bright that he's giving a matter of chaticha. He's going to be chayshish l'das Rashi. So it's like a hachra. We have a klal halacha kedivra machriya. Now, in general, the way you learn halacha kedivra machriya, that as long as the two opinions are not seiser each other, so then you can take a piece of this one and a piece of that one, and it's sort of like in the middle. You know, one says it's mutar afilah chatchila, the other one says it's asar afilah b'diavad, and then the machriya comes along and says asar chatchila mutar b'diavad. That's a very common halacha kedivra machriya. We had many cases before. We had someone said one day it said it's asar, one day it said it's mutar, and the achra is it's asar except perhaps a meruba. Very common sort of hachra. You call this hachra, and we have a klal halacha kedivra machriya. There's a beautiful, beautiful sikh chelek yud beis, chelek yud beis. Yeah, on Temiflige b'Masifta the Raki and Pasha Sazriya, where the Rebbe explains this inyan of halacha kedivra machriya, and he explains that the real inyan of a machriya is not just like he's like a negotiator and take, you give in a little bit and I'll give in a little bit sort of thing. It's a das shlishi that's kailul both, and neither das is against it. Okay, so anybody wants to look into the svaras behind the Rashi and the Ri and figure out how the Ramah is mamash or machri over here, and he's not just balancing, I'd be very interested to read it. Okay, so b'shtikl arbit. But the Rebbe does a beautiful. The Rebbe explains over there how it is that Tiferes is a machriya between Chesed and Gevura, because it's not the opposite of Chesed, not the opposite of Gevura. Chesed says give even if whether the person deserves or not, doesn't matter whether the person deserves it. Gevura says if he deserves this much, give him that much. He doesn't deserve, don't give him. Along comes Rachamim and says he doesn't deserve, but give him anyway. So Chesed says, okay, I can live with that. You said to give. I'm gonna ignore the first part. Gevura says, you also say he doesn't deserve. Okay, you say to have Rachmanas. Okay, I hear. Ich bin nicht kein Rachman. Du bist a Rachman. Okay, I'm not going to oppose you. That's the inyan from the Machriya. So over here, the Shach learns that the Ramah is like a Machriya. Could I learn the Sikha inside? Made the Sikha plus many, even Poshet in Tikkun Amidus and personal relationships, made the Sikha. But in any case, over here, according to the Shach, the Ramah is Machriya. He doesn't explain what, how, where too much, but that is, he found he's Mesupik, and therefore he paskins partial like both. Along comes the Taz, says no. The Ramah paskins like the Ri. Remember, this is the same Taz that told us not only that the Mechaber, the Taz had a breda to say that the Mechaber paskin like the Ri. Yeah? He said that Mechaber, the Taz holds that the Mechaber paskin like Rashi, according to the Ran, which is as far away from the Psak of the Ri you can get. He says, but that Mechaber, the Ramah paskins like the Ri. Why did he ask her a cheticha? He passed like the Ri? Because he wanted to be a machmer. What exactly does that mean? Not clear from the Taz, not clear from the Prima Godam. Me'ezatam, you can look over there in the Taz inside. You look at the Prima Godam, you look on the Mefarshim. Not clear. He wanted to be machmer on the cheticha. Good, but be'ikir, he wasn't a supik. He passed like the Ri, but he threw in a chumrah. How far that is, and they said, Kalim all learned that the Shach and Taz are like two different worlds. To me, it could be that they're really saying the same thing. But anyway, I didn't really see anybody say that. So
what's the nafkamina between them? I don't see the
not
nafkamina.
nafkamina. Nafkamina is what do you pass the testament? No, only kidding. Yeah. So therefore, let's make this practical. So here we have some pieces of chicken. And as you can see, somebody found a nice picture. You guys can tell already, I didn't make the slide, right? So there's chatichas, which are in the reitif. And right ago, you got a big fat chaticha that's outside the reitif. And then you got a bunch of chatichas that are, here's a category 1. You can't even see the category 1. Back over here is the category, excuse me. On top is a category 1. Over here is half in, half out is category 2. And then underwater is the category 3. And then along came somebody. And what do we do in the end? And this is a Achrola Maisa according to Samach Tzedek. I give it a practical case like I gave you the case of the fork. Milchik fork, you see it's blue. And before anybody could say, that's a milchik fork, too late. We're sitting over there, hot clearation. Okay, so you stuck it in piece category 1. What's the din? Remember now, cases pieces 1 and 3, there's very little machlekes about. The ikar machlekes is about piece number 2. When it comes to Lamaisa, I mean, there's machlekes in all of them, but basically, this fork was used. It's a ben yemei in the last 24 hours. We didn't learn about ben yemei yet, okay? But familiar, I'm sure, with the concept. Whatever. We're treating this as mamash milchik. It was used for hot cheese and a klirishin, and it's within 24 hours, and somebody stuck it in a piece of chicken. Okay. What kind of shishim do we need? Let's say, for argument's sake, the entire metal area of the fork we're using. All of that was all the way up to the handle in hot cheese. Okay. So we're going to need 60 times. Just by the way, in real life, when questions like this happen, like how do you figure out shishim? Somebody said a lot of times you don't know take. Then you have in the staruvas. What do you do in the case of Suffolk? Speak the rice, speak the rabban, and so on. But just push the balabatish keret. If you have a fork, so a fork was used, let's say, in a pot. So I might ask somebody, can you fit 60 forks in the pot? You know, shishim. Shishim's a number. Shishim, shivim. What does it mean? I mean, pile up 10 forks and see what it looks like 10 forks. You know, if something fell in, what does it look like 10 forks? Often with people, and they say, oh, no, there's no shishim there. No, first they say, for sure there's shishim, what shishim? And then they go and they look and they see the size of it, what actually fell in, and they start piling them up, and they say, oh, you know, shishim adds up to a pretty big volume by the time you're finished. Okay, whether you have to be mashayir against the whole keli, not the whole keli, we'll discuss later on. But let's say we're going to be mashayir against this whole metal part. So we're going to need, let's say, for argument's sake, the volume of that metal is 30 milliliters, for argument's sake. 30 milliliters volume of metal, we treat it like it's 30 milliliters volume of cheese, okay? 60 times 30 is, 1,800, yeah? So we're gonna need 1,800 milliliters, which is close to 2 liters, 1.8 liters, yeah? I'm in Canada, so we have metric over here. So fine, we need 1.8 milliliters where? In the pot or in the cheticha?
Machlekes.
I'm talking right now, it's chutz l'reitiv.
Lechateicha.
Chutz l'reitiv, even the reholds, you can't be mitzvah of the kedera. Everybody agrees. Rashi and the Ri agree about the piece number 1. But the Ri hold it's only piece number 1. The Rashi holds that piece number 1 and piece number 2 have the same din. At least according to the Rashi. The Ran it's even worse, but at least that's the Chumah of Rashi. The Rashi doesn't care about piece number 2 sitting partially in the Reitiv. He doesn't think it helps anybody. Okay, but as far as piece number 1, this piece over here, you need shishim against the in the cheticha to be mavatal the chalav. So you think that piece of meat is 2 liters of volume? Don't look like it to me. Okay, so we got a problem. What's with the rest of the pot?
Mutter.
Rest of the pot of mutter, the place is touching. You take kedei natila. Fine. How in the world are you going to take kedei natila of this? I mean, these little pieces you're going to throw in the garbage. Okay, but at least you're not going to have to throw in the garbage. You're not going to have to kasher the spoon you took it out with because it's only kedei natila. Okay, fine. So that's we answer the keticha. There's no shishim against the chalav over there. So that piece is no good. Spread a little damage to the other places where it's touching. Okay, so keticha med is b'chutz l'reitiv. Summary. Im ein bashishim keneged amazleg shenechtav shenitchav achaticha asura. So the piece is asur. Achaticha so neges asuras kedei natila. And any of the pieces that are touching it also kedei natila. Kedei natila. These pieces themselves are not even kedei natila. 2 centimeters. So those pieces are going to have to go in the garbage together with the one piece that the fork was stuck into. Pasham mutter. The rest of the pot's no problem. Good. Next victim. Now the plot thinkers. He stuck it into piece number 2. It's like the person that did this wasn't thinking about making the worst possible shaila, but the point, that's the way it happens. I have a simple question. You have a simple question, but sif base. Piece that's half in the rative. Nightmare. Okay, but we got the tzamach tzedek that gives up psak. Okay, so this is so we're a little bit in the middle over here, this piece. So we say like this. Basically, what's going to happen is since the Taz is machmer, the Taz is machmer, so the tzemach tzedek is going to say you be machmer lechatchila like the Taz unless it's hefsed merubah. That's the basic outline of the hachra of the tzemach tzedek. Okay, and it's difficult to learn tzemach tzedek if you didn't learn up to Sif Dalit, because Piskadinim puts many things together. But chaticha medes chetya b'reitiv. So if it's half in the reitiv, half out of the reitiv. Im ein b'chaticha shishim keneged ha-reitiv. If there's not in the chaticha, in other words, we aser the chaticha, right? Like the Taz wants to, and we worry that you need shishim in the whole path against what? Not against the tipas cholav, but against the chaticha asura, right? Like the Taz paskins, like Rashi according to the Rab. Chaticha asura v'shar atavshul asur. The chaticha is going to be asur. The chatchila paskins like the Taz, and the way the Ran learns Rashi. The Shara Tafshil is also Asr. End. I mean, as far as the Chaticha, even the Ramah Asr the Chaticha. Okay? Shara Tafshil goes for it, the Chatchila Asr the whole Tafshil. However, Mokum Hefsid Meruba Yesh Lahat the Shara Tafshil. Keshiyeshishim Kenegad Acholo. Goes to the other extreme. Hefsed Meruba will paskin like the Ri, paskin like the Shach. So to go so far as to be matter the Chaticha, the Ramah aser the Chaticha. End of story. We're not fighting with the Ramah. Ma aser the Chaticha, whatever reason he had, he aser the Chaticha. We're not going to save the Chaticha. But the rest of the Tafshil, since the Shach holds Rav paskin like the Ri, and even the Taz says that there are more paschals like the Ri. So I have said Meruba, you be mad to the rest of the Tafshil. Question.
Well, is it correct that it says Keneged HaReitiv? Shouldn't it say Keneged HaChaticha?
Where are you reading? You're reading on the left? Im ein b'chaticha shishim neged ha'reitiv. What it should be is ein b'reitiv neged ha'chaticha, probably. In other words,
Right. Right.
there's not enough reitiv to be mavatal the chaticha.
Yeah.
If you would have more than shishim in the soup to be mavatal the piece, then you could save the soup. So it's not going to be enough shishim in the pot against the milk lechatchila. But the ever that Hefsed Meruba, he'll allow that 60 in the pot against the milk. Okay, but lechatchila, the whole thing's b'diavad, right? But if it's not Hefsed Meruba, then you're going to need shishim in the pot against the piece. B'chaticha shishim neged ha'reitiv, probably it'd be better to write the shishim b'reitiv neged ha'chaticha. That's what it means.
Also, one more question is that this is all medvarim amurim when you had a tipas chalav that fell, or in this case there was the fork. But if it was a hard piece of cheese, then there's no question that it'd be like kedei natila in all these cases.
No. The kedei natila, you're saying well, it fell on the right table, it fell on the top of another piece.
It fell in another piece.
So again, the kedei natila is Only when it's not in a pat. Those were the three explanations of the Taz why we don't say Kedei Natila.
Oh, right. Okay, you're right.
So we're going to still not get you away for the first piece that the cheese hit. We're not going to let you get away with Kedei Natila. Okay, so after all of these Akdam, it's time to learn Shulchan Aruch. Okay, we saw already part, and we have a little curveball at the very last piece of the Mechaber. So we actually, Mr. Shem will finish. Yeah. Okay, so let's learn again some base. Nafal Chalav Tekadei Shel Bosor. We learned parts of this already, but now we understand broader what's happening. And you'll read this over a few times, and you realize how in the world did they reconstruct this whole pilpul? It's like the Rambam. This is Lashon Rambam. It's like the Rambam says a lot of things over there, but your mamish don't know what to do. You don't even know what he's talking about b'chal until you hit the nice kalim. Nafal Chalav Tekadei Shel Bosor. Milk fell into a pot of meat. Taste the piece that it fell out of. And the way we've been learning is talking about piece number one. It's out of the reitif. Okay, we learned that already. You taste the piece, you need shishim in the piece. And that's why we answered that piece that the fork went into, because we didn't have shishim against it. And there's nothing to taste. We don't do this anymore. Now, umashayim bakula, and when you're mashayir with the rest of the pot against that entire piece. So that entire piece now became nasa nevela if it had tam cholav in it, and therefore, if it fell in after it became aser, if everything that was in the pot, the other pieces of meat and the vegetables and the soup and the spices, you have shishim against the chaticha, then a chaticha surah v'shamut. So the chaticha is still aser, but the rest of the pot you can eat. Now, that you only let it fell in at the end after it became aser. That you didn't shake up the pot right away when it fell in. Then you could have saved the whole story if you shook up the pot. Now, whether you're allowed to do it or not, a different story, but nobody did that. Okay, you shook it at the end after it became already aser, and then it fell into the rest of the pot. But like Kisi, you didn't do near, and you didn't do Kisi, you didn't put the cover on either. And that's a steer that looks like he means from the beginning to the end, which we talked about already. Or you covered it from the beginning to the end. And we learned the two different perushim of what it means at sof. Sof what? Sof the resich or sof the spashtus acholov. So then if it's near a kisa, so then you can use the entire pot to be mavatal b'cholov. Now the Ramah comes in. This we basically learned all this already. V'kein imlay, the Ramah we didn't learn. V'kein imlay near klal. And so too, if you didn't shake it at all, you didn't do anything. You didn't shake it, not at the beginning, not at the end, and you didn't cover it. Now we're talking about piece number one. It's out of the reitif. So what's with the rest of the pot? So he says, before we read the next, after Lakis Aklal, what would you say? What's going to be the din? The tipus challah fell on the piece number one that's out of the reitif. And you didn't do anything. Sat there like a statue. You didn't do near, you didn't do kisei, it didn't fall in, nothing happened. Sat over there like a galim. Then you come over there and say, what's going on with this piece? Okay, throw the piece in the garbage. No shishim in the piece. What's with the rest of the pot? Don't read further. Think. What's with the rest of the pot?
There is shishim in the pot?
What's with the pieces it touched?
According to Rashi, according to also.
Talking now about the piece that's completely out of the reitif. Case number one, where you stuck the fork into the piece that was sticking out.
Tila?
Kedei Tila, anything is touching the Tila, anything below, even the piece itself that was touching, if it's less than past Natila, you're allowed to eat it, and the rest of the pot for sure. Right? That's what logic tells you, everything you learned up until now. Along comes the Ramah and throws a curveball. Im yesh shishim bekedera negatipas cholav shenofa, ein also rak achatich levad. Ushar kedera mutter. The chaticha is going to be awesome, and the rest of the kedera is going to be mutter, but you still need shishim in the kedera against tipus chalav. How does that sound to you? This should send up an alarm. Why in the world do you need shishim in the kedera against tipus chalav? Nobody holds, not the Ri, not Rashi. Nobody holds that it goes into the kedera from the piece that's chutz. Why need shishim in the kedera? Shach and Taz both put up the alarm. What's going on over here? Where did they shishim in the kedera negative chalav? Why? Patience. V'keinim near betchila kisa miyad, and along comes the Ramah and says, "This metchila batzov thing, I don't accept this whole thing. At the beginning is good enough. If you shook it at the beginning, you stirred it at the beginning, or you covered it at the beginning, you didn't do it at the end. That's not a problem. As long as you did it right away, not a problem. Okay. So we're going to have to revisit this piece of the Ramah because we have 5 minutes left, and I just want to finish this last piece, so we will come back Emir Tashem to that. But there's one last piece of Mechaber we have to finish. And this, the tour comes along. This is Lashon HaRambam. This is the end. This is like 3 different halachas of Rambam. It's Ilchas Mechalos Asuras Perek Tes. It's halacha Tes, Yud, Yud Aleph. Big long Ravid over there, all the thing. And the Rambam breaks it into a few different halachas. And the Rambam adds this halacha. And the tour comes along and says, what? It don't make any sense. And you're going to see the Ramah is going to say, V'yesh cholkim. And he passes like the tour, V'achinad. He's not going to accept this Rambam and this Mechaber. What did he say? If it fell directly into the soup or into the pieces, and you don't know which piece it fell into, and implied in this is you didn't do anything right away, you woke up a little bit later, which is Lashon Lechatchila, by the way, you're allowed to stir up the entire kedera until the whole thing gets all mixed up, and then taste it. If it has tam chalav, no good. If it doesn't have tam chalav, then it's okay. Can't find a guy in Mashayim B'shish. So Shachantad, the tour, what's going on over here? If it falls into the marak, you have to do anything. Why have to do anything? It fell into the marak. We don't see anything about stirring it. With stirring it is when it fell into the piece. There, near a kisa. But if it fell into the marak, a liquid fell into the liquid, some milk fell into the soup. So who says you have to do anything? It's okay, it's a nice thing to stir it up, but who says you have to do such a thing? It's a liquid into a liquid. We don't need to do anything. It's going to get, you'll wait around a little while, and it's going to get mixed up. Now, if it fell into a chaticha, it's not why do you have to stir it. What does it help to stir it? If it fell onto the chaticha, so why is the rest of the pot shuldik? You don't know which chaticha it fell into? So let's say there's 100 chatichas in the pot, make it better. 50 chatichas in the pot, and it fell into one piece. There's no shishim, so one of them is aser. So you don't know, okay? But it became aser. Later on, you stir up the whole pot. Say, is there any tam chalav over there? There's no tam chalav. Of course, there's no tam chalav. You need shishim against the chaticha nasa nevela now. It doesn't taste like chalav. If you tasted each piece to see if it had tam chalav, then there's what to talk about. But here you're going to taste the whole pot and you don't taste any chalav, you're going to be matter the pot. How is that possible? So the tour comes along, and the Shachantah speak about it also. First of all, you're putting marek and chatichas in the same category, and they have the opposite din. You're putting marek and chatichas in the same category, and then you're saying you're going to mix them both up and taste it. Yeah, the marek you don't need it, and the chatichas it shouldn't help. What's going on? So Ramah said, "Yesh chalkin." Torah disagrees. This doesn't help. If you shook it up right away, then if you do it miyad, then I'm already said that that's where we paskin. And there are those that learn pshat in the Rambam like that also, like we discussed before. So if you did it right away, good. You didn't do it about stuff, fine. The Rambam paskin for sure, that's okay. But if you do it later, why should that help? With the paskin like the Torah says the Rambam. The shaila is what did the Rambam mean, and what is the and what is the Mechaber talking about? So we're almost at the end, but just going to give you one part of the Nakuda, which is a din. It's a svara that has very, very wide-ranging implications. So even though we don't paskin like this Mechaber over here, we paskin like the Ramah, but nevertheless, the svara for the chatichas is all in the words v'lei neda. Look at the marek. Okay, you want to mix it up better, fine. But what's going to help with the chatichas? So the vart is that we have certain dinim that your awareness of the taruvas, your awareness of the iser creates the iser. And it does not apply until you have awareness of it. Yeah, right at the beginning of Masechta Beya, you have over there, they bring many dugmois, the poskim here, the Nesa Kalim. But yeah, right the first half or two, right at the beginning of Masechta Beya, you have a Maisa with truma that got mixed up into a bunch of barrels, and you don't know which barrel it's in. So there's a Psachves, 100 barrels, 200 barrels, whatever it is. So it's only in one of the barrels. But can you be matzdarif for the other barrels? You don't know which barrel it's in. The truth is, the whole Hilchos Taruvos is like this. When you have Taruvos, you have chad b'trei bottle, you have bittul berev. So this is now a kosher Taruvos. What do we kind of kosher Taruvos over here? One of them is for sure aser. So what's going on over here? If you know which one is aser, you're allowed to eat it because it's Taruvos, bittul berev? Of course not. So we see that the das is pile a certain change in halachic status in these nyon. So therefore, to say that you're being mavatal this issue and the thing was nasa nevela, they say it was not nasa nevela if you don't know chaticha it fell into. It's as if, in the case of the truma, you don't know which barrel it's in. So it's as if it's falling down equally into all the barrels. So therefore, you can mix it up now. Why? Because leineda, all the other cases up until now, you knew which piece it fell into, and the piece is taka asr because you saw which piece it fell into. Over here, since you don't know, its iser did not become kavua in the chaticha that it was nasa nevela because of leineda, and therefore it helps neir. Okay, lamaisa, the Torah doesn't agree. Oh, I have to give it up then over here, and we'll finish. Yeah. So if it fell into the liquid, why do you have to shake it? And when it came into the chaticha, how's it going to help? So the Beis Yosef says, watch with the marak. If you want to make it spread out, you spashatate it. If you want to mix it up well, the Maria Abuav. It's also from the Gedele Sfard back in the times of Beis Yosef. Shachatichas yet start for the shishim. Another svara that you'll make it even a better bittul because you'll get the chatichas involved there also. Shake. But the ikir, how is it going to help over here? So Riben Chaviv says, "Meduva b'nir miyad v'lanir mocher." So Poshet gives a simple way. He didn't say that, but okay, you can solve the whole problem by saying he shook it right away. Okay, but the Maggid from the Shach give this other spot I just gave you now. But since you don't know what piece it fell into, the chaticha did not become chaticha nasa nevela. There's no chanan until you know which piece of fell into. Now, whether under which circumstances we can use this svara, and when not, is another story altogether. But we do see that there is such a story, and now I'm trying to get back to the screen.
Is that because Hanan, to begin with, by Bosor b'cholav is a chumrah of the Chachamim, so therefore they said that in such a case, we
Fakat Hanan by Bosor b'cholav is more than Bashari Surim. We'll see next week. Bashari Surim is machlekes. By Bosor b'cholav is no machlekes.
Is it a metzias? Is Hanan a metzias, or it's a chumrah? In other words, it's not about the tam. I guess it is. I mean,
it's that's why in a certain sense, what does it mean nasa nevela? Like, what does that mean nasa nevela? You have, if you want to talk biology, chemistry, whatever it is, physics, you go and you measure the piece, so you start counting molecules. You have a machlekes in the Gemara after the sachta aser or mutter. You have something that became aser. And what if you squeeze out the iser, so then you can eat what's left? If you have a piece of meat, there's no bittul b'shishim, now it's possible chalav. If you squeeze out all the milk, then you can eat it. You say after the sachta aser. Why? It's the metziastic question. We're afraid you're not going to squeeze it all out, or it's a halachadik. You change the metzias. So if you learn chassidus, you know that you change. When it became this again, shalosh clips atmeis. You're getting your chayas from a different place. I don't know when it's going to come up, but the Alter Rebbe's biur Nochas Pesach of Bosor B'chalav and Shari Surim, that Bosor B'chalav is a shem chodesh. It's a new iser. Once something became, it's all Eisis Anigla over there, the Alter Rebbe, but Chassidus is very, very moving. The Alter Rebbe says that it's different when you have chametz, which was a heter, and then it came Pesach, it became aser, but it didn't have to change its name. Bosor b'chalav, before it got mixed, it was heter. After it got mixed, it became iser. Yeah, but it's much more difficult to make it aser because you got to make a new name. It's got to be mamshach hanaya chayes. Alter Rebbe doesn't say Reisis Achsidus. There's an Eisis Hanikla. It's from Aran. Alter Rebbe has Rishonim say like that. But that whole idea that it's a new Metzia Shalisim, it's a ganz andere moves. Okay, Rabbi say, I see my background over here is not working too good. I keep becoming Ois Metzias over here. The Rambam says over there, and then you say that Nisparer, the part that's close to the ocean, the sand and Nisparer, and it dissolves over there. This you have these false backgrounds over there. You keep have these pashtus agashmis. Okay, so now you have what to learn. Zil gemer, it's an ishkin joke. This needs chazara. Everything needs chazara, but you see over here, this is a head full. Okay. Good. We'll see you next week. Congratulations. I have a halbasian.
Yes, okay.
All too.